Development Control Committee A at Mid-Suffolk District Council. And can I first of all just remind you of some of the domestic arrangements for today. The WCs are situated outside the council chamber, just by the lift and the stairs. Cold water is also available out there in the breakout area. If the fire alarm does sound, can you please leave the meeting room or the council chamber, follow the fire exit signs, and we gather on the Ipswich Town Football Club training pitch, and please do not re-enter the building until we're told it is safe to return. Can I just ask everyone just to have a quick look at your mobile phones, just make sure they are in silent or switched off, please. We do have a gentleman's agreement that if it rings, we'd like you to make a donation to the chairman's charity, so if it does ring. Can I just remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live on the internet and will be capable of repeated viewings for those that may want to. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items, which we do not have today. If you make a representation to the meeting, you'll be deemed by the council to have consented to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting so long as the public and press are not lawfully excluded. And so can I just remind members that when they speak and to officers, please remember to turn your microphones on so that everyone in the chamber can hear. And can you please speak loudly into the mics, because we have had reports in the past that people up in the gallery can't hear clearly. Just for the benefit, with so many members of the public here today, you may not be familiar with how this meeting will work. I'm Matthew Hicks, I'm one of the district councillors, and myself and my colleagues here on my right at the front row, between us will make the decisions on the applications before us today. At Mid-Suffolk Council, a ward member, an elected member, may not vote on an application within their own ward, and therefore when that happens they cross the floor, and you'll see on the left hand side we have two councillors who will speak on the applications but may not vote on the applications before us today. We have various officers who will present the applications to us. We have Ian, who's our legal advisor, then we have others that just make sure everything flows. When your time is, if you are on the list to speak, you'll be asked to come up to the front row, push the microphone, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. There is an egg timer, and I'm afraid we do keep to the 3 minutes. So if you go beyond it, you will be cut off. So please do try and keep to the 3 minutes. I think that's all the introductions for today. So moving on to the agenda, the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence and substitutions. Do we have any, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have two apologies this morning of Councillor Eburn and Councillor Turner, and two substitutions of Councillor Keith Wellen for Councillor Eburn and Councillor Andrew Mellon for Councillor Turner.
Lovely, thanks very much. Do we need to receive any declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest by members? I just want, just for the record, to state that I have funded the Stonham Aspal Football Club for pitch works last year. So I just think, just so that's clear, I don't think it's a pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest, but I'd just like to declare it.
Yeah, Chair. Yeah, Chairman, you did sensibly inform me before today, and it's a non-pecuniary interest. It was, it was from your county councillor's locality budget, right? Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. Any other members? No, thank you. Do we have any declarations of lobbying? Yeah, which item? Yeah, we've all had the same one. Yeah. Thank you. Any declarations of personal site visits by members is the next item on the agenda. Any? No, none declared. Okay. Item number 5 on the agenda is the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of December. Members have that before you. If I just run through each page, and if you've got any concerns or anything you'd like to point out that you feel is incorrect, please just raise your hand. So starting on page 7 of our papers, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 and 15. Are you happy that I sign those as a true record of the meeting? Is that agreed? Yeah. Agreed? Thank you. I'll do that after the meeting. Okay, so back to the agenda. Item agenda number 6 is to receive notifications of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme. Are there any received?
None received, Chair.
Okay, great. So we move straight on to schedule of planning applications. We will stay in the order as laid out in the papers. And the first item is the land south of the street, Stonham Aspal, DC 19-02299. And over to you to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Let's see. Oh, that screen doesn't work. Before us we have a full planning application for the erection of 46 dwellings, including creation of access, provision of parking and play space, and provision of drainage basin and landscaping. We also have improvements to the Stonham Aspal Football Club, including the erection of a new pavilion and creation of new pitches. That's the wrong button.
Is that the side down?
No. Can we use the mouse?
Yeah. No.
No.
If you right click on it, you can go to the next slide on top.
God, where's that? There we go. Apologies for the technical issues. We've got the aerial map of Stonham Aspal here with the application site shaded in purple. You can see the main body of the village running up here to the west, and then we've got Stonham Barns down here to the immediate east. If we zoom in a little bit further, we can see we have Crowcroft Road running down here with a band of trees. And then if we look at the constraints shown around the area without the aerial mapping, it's a lot easier to see how the site relates to the rest of the village. We have a number of listed buildings running along the street. The ones of particular note are here to the immediate northeast, and then here to the east. They are Chevers Farm and Chevers Farm Barn, Garden Cottage and Ponds Cottage. They're all listed at grade 2. We have a number of public rights of way that cross over the site as well. We have one running from the south, roughly north, and it also veers off as well in the middle of the site and then continues east. If we look at the brown line, this is the existing settlement boundary for Stonham Aspal, and we can see that within the current local plan, the site lies outside. If we move forward, we have the excerpt from the draft joint local plan, including the allocation of this site. We can see that the boundary of Stonham Aspal has been redrawn in this purple line here, and we can see these green areas. They indicate designated open spaces. Obviously, at the moment, it's designated open space for the football club that's currently on the site, and there's been the extension of the designated open space here to the south to allow for relocation of the football club following development of the site. Move on, we have the red line outline here, showing the application site, and then we have the blue line denoting land within the ownership of the applicants. And if we come here, we superimpose the aerial view of the existing site zoomed in over the red line site boundary, which is shown here in this dark line.
You're going to have to speak into the mic louder.
Sorry,
Speak up.
Right, here we go. Can people hear me at the back, just so I'm... Right, okay. So we now have the aerial view superimposed on the existing site. We have the car park in off the A1120 here with the recycling facilities, and then we have the existing club buildings down in this corner of the site here. If we come now to the submitted landscape plans, we can see how the site would be divided. We would have built frontage facing onto the street here, with some additional housing on the land currently occupied by the pitches of the football club, with the football club moving. So we'd have erection of a new pavilion here, car parking, and then we'd have a new junior pitch, new full-size pitch and training area, along with the play area serving the rest of the development and the wider village. I've included this from the design and access statement to just run through the rationale for how the site has been designed and developed. We have the blue land at the south, that's the community land, providing an edge of sight between the open fields and the built-up area. We have the purple areas, which are typified by narrower streets with sort of more irregular building lines, trying to mimic the organic growth that we see elsewhere within Stonham Aspal. And then we have the yellow area, which is the spine through the site. So it's a much wider road to provide the connection through. We've got homes running parallel to it, and we have much larger pavements than we normally have as well to cope with pedestrian access. Members will see from the report that we've had a number of comments from the Highway Authority with regards to the design for this particular application. I've just put up the original site layout for information. So this refers to the first lot of comments that we've had from the Highways Authority. They were particularly concerned about the access point opposite Does Field, the nature of the shared access, and also wanting to see some revisions to parking plots within the site. We've secured that amendment. We have a new access point further away from Does Field Junction, and we've amended parking at plots, the relevant plots. Highways have come back and still pointed out some issues with plots number 1 to 23 and 24, and the need for improvements to the bus stops on the street close to the site. And then we come to the final layout, which relates to the final set of Highways comments, and we can see from those comments that Highways are happy with the parking provision provided, they're happy with the access, and we can move forward without holding objection from them. With regards to the public right-of-way, obviously we have them crossing the site, as mentioned earlier. And in terms of the site, there'd also need to be a separate process gone through for the realignment of the footpath along this yellow line shown. So it would take it around the edge of the pitches instead of across, and then would still allow for connection to the existing line of the footpath running roughly north, and then the veer off would be around the top of the pitches and play area, and then through the site on the provided pavements. The site's to be delivered in phases, with the first being this outlined in red. So we'd have delivery of the first 19 units here at the same time as we have the implementation of the sports pitches to the south and the provision of the pavilion. It's proposed in the report that we would then restrict the development of the final phase of the site until such time that the sports pitches are provided and can be handed over to Stonham Aspal FC. So it wouldn't be the case that we could have the development without the benefits to the football club. We'd have to see the developments to the football club handed before we were able to complete the development. I've just included the roof height plan for members. The red roofs indicate two-storey buildings, while the pink represents single-storey buildings, and you'll see that there's a predominance of bungalows provided on the site. The decision to utilise bungalows more fully within the site has come about through consultation between the applicants and the parish council and members of Stonham Aspal Village. Particularly in terms of what housing need there is, what preference there is for housing types within the village. We have two-storey fronting onto the street, where building height is predominantly two-storey. We have a small section within the site itself, but the rest is single-storey. We've also got the site access plan. Apologies, members, I wasn't able to trial the presentation before we got here, so the detail is a bit lacking. We have the site here to the south, and we have Crowfield Road running down here, and we have the street running through the site, and effectively showing that we've got the sufficient visibility displays running from both directions from the access. We have the elevations and floor plans of the proposed sports pavilion. It's fairly utilitarian in design, but then given that it needs to be a very functional building, I think that's perhaps understandable. We'll then run through the house types, and I'll run through fairly quickly. If there's any particular house types we want to spend a bit more time discussing, we can do. In terms of built form, we've got a materials palette at the end that I'll run through, but effectively the house types would be a mix of red brick, timber boarding and render. So we have plots 1, 2, 14 and 15, 3 and 17, 4 and 26. And you can see often we're reusing the same house types occasionally, but always with a change of materials to give a different feel to each individual unit. There we go. And if we look at the street scenes here, we have a view along the proposed street frontage here with the 2-storey buildings, and then we have a view of the southern side of the Spine Road, which I think gives a clearer indication of the final build of the units proposed. They've attempted in some ways to replicate the vernacular scene within Stonham Aspal. Obviously these are modern buildings and it's difficult sometimes to fully replicate historic form, but I believe they're an honest attempt to provide something. I think they're quite polite in their form. And then if we look at the materials palette, at the end here, we can see what they're attempting to do. And I'll just run through the photos as well of the site. We'll come on to again. So here's the entrance to the site from within the site. This is the car park looking out to the existing junction. And then this is the junction looking into the rest of Stonham Aspal. Note the footpath at the edge here connecting up. So the facilities within Stonham Aspal itself are within sort of 800 metres of the application site, although it's acknowledged that there isn't a continuous footpath. Quite often anyone making a pedestrian movement from this site into the village would be forced to cross the road at several points, although at this point the A1120 is at 30 miles an hour. If we look back towards Stonham Barns, which is following the road along this way, we can see a length of continuous footpath here, which then terminates around the corner. There's then no further footpath connection from Stonham Aspal through to Stonham Barns. Anything that any pedestrian movements that side would either be made on highway's verge or on the road, and be quite intimidating to pedestrians. This is the view from the entrance towards one of the listed buildings. This is Garden Cottage here with the thatch roof. This is the view along the northern boundary of the site with existing hedgerow and the existing recycling centre served at Stonham Aspal FC. We'll just move closer. You can just in the distance here, through the trees, spot Garden Cottage. And if we come now through the site, moving around the car park, this is looking into the site and we can see the existing pitches in the distance. And then coming round again, we have them here, and then this is the bank of trees seen aerially down Crowfield Road. This is the existing pavilion building, set of buildings serving the football club, and these units here, these existing units, houses, sorry, served off the existing access. From looking at the plans and layouts, they'll still be served by the existing access, and temporary measures will be made during construction for the residents of these units to continue being able to access their house. We now look closer in at the existing clubhouse buildings. They're all sort of prefabricated buildings. So we have the changing rooms and the clubhouse itself. And then if we just backtrack here, behind the clubhouse buildings here, you can't see it through the dense planting here, but that's where Chevers Farm and Chevers Farm Barn are located as well. I'll pass things back to members in case they have any specific questions they'd like me to address that I've not addressed in the report. And then we can move on to speakers.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Questions at this point? Yeah, Councillor Haddingham, straight off.
Thank you. What trees and hedgerow are we going to be losing, Daniel, around the edge of the site?
In terms of hedgerow, if we go back into the presentation, I'll just come back to the landscaping plan for you. So, we'll utilise this. So, the existing dense planting here would be retained, and we'd also be retaining part of the hedgerow running along the site. There would have to be a gap created, but we would have some infill planting to strengthen that at the front as well. We'd also have some infill planting within the site in terms of the landscaping here. And then again, we've got the existing hedgerow running around the edges of the site, around the edges of the field retained, and down here. And then we'd have some additional planting around the drainage basin here at the very south of the site.
Councillor Mance.
Thank you. I have a number of questions. Would you like me to do them all at once, or shall I
three
do them
at a
one at a
time.
time? Okay. First of all, can I ask if there are any of the affordable housing? I know it's a reduced proportion of affordable housing, but are there any in phase 1? And could you also tell me if there is the actual area of the existing football pitches, is the new area for football pitches significantly bigger or about the same? And third question in this batch is education provision. Now in the papers it talks about a contribution for transport to school, but is there no need for any actual education provision, financial contribution?
So in terms of delivery of affordable, yes, we've got a reduced level of affordable housing coming forward as a result of this development. In terms of delivery, that would be governed by the Section 106. If we wanted to see delivery within phase 1, we could try and see what we could do to ensure that all 4 come forward within phase 1. I don't think that would be an outrageous suggestion from the council. In terms of areas of the existing pitches, we have a loss of 1 pitch. However, we do have improvement of facilities. So our policies regarding retention of sports pitches and making alternative provision for them do allow for where you're losing sports pitches, we should be looking to regain an area of similar size that's going to be of comparable value. But what we can also look at is where existing pitches are or where existing facilities are less than the community might need or the sports club might utilise, we can also accept an increase of the quality in terms of the open space. So if the open space is more usable, is better suited to the use that the football club would make of it, we can also accept a reduction in terms of the space. And in terms of the pitches provided, we've got a training area, 1 full-size adult pitch and 1 full-size junior pitch. I think at the moment there are 2 full-size pitches on the site, so we'll be losing 1 full-size pitch. But then the trade-off would be if the replacement pitch was more suitable and able to be made better use of, is that acceptable to members? In terms of the education contributions, I'm just going to try and see if I can get to the response from Suffolk County Council in terms of what they'd like to see. Which I think is page 60-something. 69. Yes. So, in terms of what they're looking for, there are minimum pupil yields associated with the development. So we've got 11 primary school age pupils, 8 secondary school age pupils, and then to pupils of sixth form age. The Education Authority would like me making SIL bids on the back of the application to provide the additionality of places required. The only thing that lies outside the realm of SIL to provide is the transport costs for secondary school pupils. Although we're getting a reduced level of affordable housing delivery on the site, we will be getting full SIL receipts for the 46 dwellings. So there'd be no loss of SIL, so we'd be able to mitigate that need.
Keep going.
I've got another couple of questions. Firstly, I'd like to ask, are there any plans to put solar panels on the roof of the clubhouse in particular? I'll ask a question about the pedestrian route to Stonham Barns. Although I know this isn't part of this application, I vaguely remember in the past that there was a suggestion that...
Without the need for planning permission. And condition 5 within the report would require I think it would require an outline of sustainability measures to be utilised within the development and then running of the site. So we could see further information come in there as well, and could look to secure that there. With regards to the pedestrian route, if we can go back to the plan, I'm hoping I'll put an aerial view in. I've gone the wrong way. So I think this plan would probably be the best to show it. So in terms of the route into Stonham Aspal itself, there is a footpath in here, the entrance to Stonham Barns. Members might recall there was an application site in here who was looking to deliver part of that route. There is a site here with granted permission that's to provide part of a route through the site. There's then existing section 106 contribution to make that final connection. So in the end, in determining this application, there wasn't any weight that we could give to a potential connection to Stonham Barns. Although, having visited the site a number of times, you do see people making a walking connection there, but it's not one I would recommend.
Okay, other people. Yeah, let's start down there. We'll start with Councillor Mayor, then work along.
Thank you. I note that highways initially had some reservations about the recreational and sporting facilities being off the same access. What changed to allow them to change their mind to accept that single access?
Apologies. Effectively, the applicants have gone away and relocated the access away from the junction at Doesfield, so we've got a better position within the road layout for the access. They've also widened that. It's significantly wider than it would normally be. The pavements are wider than they would normally be, and in discussion with the Highways Authority are now happy with that relocated access, giving a better route through the site, and one that they aren't particularly concerned about in terms of residential traffic meeting potential match day traffic. In terms of the residential uses, they'd mainly be operating during what highways would consider to be peak hours for vehicle movements, whereas the football matches themselves would likely be Saturdays, Sundays, and then if the sports club had any meetings, they would normally be outside of those peak traffic hours in the evening anyway.
Given the issues that this rugby club have with parking in the residential area around it, are there any proposals to put parking restrictions on the residential part of the road to prevent cars parking who are visiting football?
I think we could look into that as part of the conditions to the application. I think yes. I think we would want to see parking for the football club completely housed within the parking provided on site for the football club. In terms of the level of parking provided, Highways are happy that meets their adopted guidance for the level of parking required, but I don't see any harm in looking at TROs to provide either single yellow lines or double yellow lines on that main spine road through the site that would connect up and would likely be the one most popular for on-street parking to access the football club.
Thank you, Chair. Would you like mine 3 at a time as well? On slide 46, the footway along the site frontage seems to be quite narrow. It seems to be narrower than at the sort of foreground of the photograph. Do we know what width the footpath is? Seems to be narrower along that, and I think that's the length of footway that would be used to get to the bus stops.
Yeah, so looking at it and having visited the site, it is not 1.8 metres, which I think is standard now in highways terms. It is narrower than that, but then when we go to a lot of villages within Suffolk, there might not be a footpath at all, so we do at least have some provision. It might not be standard provision, but there is at least some provision. I would say the width of that footpath is fairly typical of the width of footpaths within Stonham Aspal in terms of making your connection into the rest of the village. I think some might be slightly narrower, some might be slightly wider, just depending on when they were put in, but I think that's a good general guide in terms of how wide they would be. It's probably not wide enough that you would comfortably pass someone pushing a bicycle or with a pram, but I think that it's certainly wide enough for two people walking in opposite directions to make a passing movement without stepping into the highway.
Could you indicate where the bus stops are, please? And going back to your previous answer, is there scope perhaps for achieving a wider footpath along the frontage of the site, even if not anywhere else?
So if we stay with the same photo for a moment, you can see one of the vertical flagpoles for the bus stop here. And if we come further into the site, you can actually see it better just there at the edge of the photograph. So it's not that far from the site itself at all. In terms of the site frontage, if we come back to the red line plan. Can we dim the lights? Can we dim the lights? Thank you. The frontage of the site comes along here, so potentially there is discussion that could be made with the applicants to see if they would like to widen the footpath in that particular area, but it would only be within the scope of their land ownership that we'd be able to achieve that. That's not been requested by the Highway Authority though, so it would be at their discretion as to whether they wanted to widen or not.
One more?
Oh, lots more. The junior pitch, is that match size junior pitch? It seems to be too small for under 16s. I wonder if it's there for sort of under 8s, under 9s or something. Is it a suitable match shape and size?
It's been described as a full-size junior pitch,
right, okay.
And consultation with Sports England hasn't found any deficiencies in terms of the proposed pitch sizes.
Thank you. Do we know where the floodlights would be situated?
At this point, I don't. There are existing floodlights on the site, and I think it would be useful if we utilise conditions to secure light spill diagrams and positions of the flood lighting, so that we can be sure we're not. So we're sure that we're not creating a light nuisance or a light disturbance and further 15, 20, half an hour after the end of that session, just to allow for clear up and not from the route of the services that connect to Stonham Aspal, no. And the frequency of the services, the 115 service I think is 6 times daily at the moment, and the other service I think is twice daily. So it's not a particularly frequent service, but no, I can give no comfort as to whether those services would be continuing in the future. That would be a commercial decision for the companies that run those services. You know, if the bus company isn't making a profit running the lines, then they will look to either stop running the service, reduce frequency, or pull out of running them full stop. But then that is the situation for a lot of our rural villages, is that we don't really have the certainty over how frequently or how popular the bus routes are, other than at time of writing.
Last. Yeah, okay. Do we know if the balancing pond will be wet or dry at the end of the storm when it is drained? Will there be a retention of water? And do we know if the drainage board have confirmed there is downstream capacity for the flow from the balancing pond?
So the internal drainage board agreement is separate to planning. The applicants will have to have that before they begin. So if the drainage board decide that they aren't going to allow them to make that connection, they'll have to come back to us for further information. In terms of the submitted detail, the flood and water team at County Council are satisfied with the detail. The way the drainage basin would operate is that in times of severe rainfall or flood, the water would flow down into the drainage basin and be held there and then discharged over time into the surrounding landscape. So depending on the severity of the flood event, it may be wet at the end of the event, but the idea would be that it would gradually reduce in level until the basin was clear as well. The landscaping plan suggests planting within the basin, so at dry times it would just appear to be an element of the landscape. At wet times it would appear as a an opportune pond, I suppose. But the planting proposed would be sufficient to deal with both that dry period and wet.
Thank you. Councillor Muller.
Would it be possible to ensure there are some electrical charging points for vehicles, either in some of the properties or at the new pavilion for the football club? Because I noticed in the papers it doesn't seem any mention of those at all.
Yeah, we would normally deal with the detail of that through condition. I'm just having a look, and we could utilise that. We could tie that into the sustainability measures, condition 5. And I think it's also one of the conditions that the Highways Authority have mentioned as well. So we probably wouldn't do it twice. However we roll it in, we'd do it, but we could secure electric vehicle charging points, both for the football club and for the facilities within the site itself.
Can I just ask a couple of questions? No, we'll keep going. Councillor Mellon, then Councillor Field.
Thank you, Chair. I sort of got my head around the layout, which has moved to avoid a sort of crossroads type entrance, but that pushes the entrance to the estate a bit closer to the Crowfield Road junction and to the corner coming round from Stonham Barnes. I appreciate this is in the 30-mile-an-hour limit, but do we have a speed survey that shows the actual speeds on that section of road?
Not with this application, no, but then the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit does begin further along to the east, sort of not quite at the junction of the A1120 with East End Road, but a little way before it. So we were well into the 30-mile-an-hour limit there. I note that the discussions around highways and the transport assessment do note 2 incidents within the past 5 years, one at the junction with Crowcroft Road and one close to the junction with East End Road. But investigations into those accidents both recorded that they were due to driver error and were not indicative of substandard facilities within the highway themselves.
Councillor Field.
Thank you. I was just going to point out on electric vehicle charging points, there is a provision, the 4th bullet point up on page 38, or the 4th one above 3, but it doesn't make any mention of, well, it doesn't actually say it's electric vehicle charging points, but I guess that's obvious. But it doesn't actually make any suggestions about the numbers that will be included. Could be just one. We've got some guidance.
I mean, is there a number that members would like to see included?
Yeah, John.
Apologies, Member, if I can just clarify. We're happy to put forward the condition would be 1 per dwelling, and we'd ask for a scheme in respect of the pavilion, and we'll see what comes forward in that respect. We've not had a scheme for a pavilion before, so I would ask probably for the details to be agreed with the applicant on that basis, but it would be 1 per dwelling otherwise, as per normal, which we have been doing consistently for the last year or so.
Thank you.
Councillor Morley, you have a question.
Do we know what provision has been made for the football club and where they're going to play whilst their field is being dug up?
I'm not aware of any provisions at the moment. I suspect the club will have made provision for... Yeah, of course.
I've got the phasing statement and development programme before me, and I don't think that was in the papers. I'm not sure if it was in the bundle, if anyone can help me out. It might help if I quickly read the statement in that respect, if you bear with me. So, the phasing of the development is proposed in 2 phases to avoid to avoid disruption to the football club as much as possible. Phase 1 would consist of the construction of 19 dwellings along with the construction of the clubhouse, community hub and sports facilities. It is envisaged the completion of this phase would take 12 months from the grant of planning permission or from the point that conditions are dealt with. Phase 2 would consist of the construction of the remaining dwellings, and obviously this would not be commenced until the new clubhouse and sport facilities have been completed. Again, they envisage another 12 months to complete that phase. That's what it says here. So that's what they put forward as a phasing plan, and that is conditioned in your papers to follow that phasing plan.
No, it does. It helps. Thank you. Councillor William, you've still got more questions, or no? You're happy? Yeah. Anyone else? Can I just ask about the football club? I see in the papers that the ongoing maintenance of the car park and various other things then are moved to the liability of the football club. And my experience is that lots of these football clubs, and small community clubs are living on a shoestring just every year trying to keep going. Have we heard from the football club that they are happy to take on that liability?
I'm assuming the football club are. In looking into the application, the applicants have submitted certificate B and named Stonham Aspal FC as the landowner. So presumably they are fully aware of their maintenance requirements. In terms of some of the areas of planting, they are effectively left to be low maintenance areas. So the drainage basin wouldn't really require a lot of looking over. And in fact, actually, you might, in terms of biodiversity, want to leave it well alone, completely untrimmed. The pitches themselves, they're obviously well equipped to manage and maintain. I think they'd also be taking on the maintenance of the play area, which to some degree makes sense given it's more within their purview, and the district council isn't really taking on maintenance of new play areas. We'll be looking for details of that as part of the conditions and also secured within Section 106. So we'd have full details of what exactly was going on there, and presumably the football club will be present during those discussions as well.
Okay. Any other questions, or we can move on? Okay, so we're going to move on now to hear from the speakers. First up is we have Peter Emerson from Stonham Aspal Parish Council. If you'd like to come up, and you get the 3 minutes, please.
Good morning. As a parish council, we needed to be consistent in our approach and decision making to this application by applying the same criteria as we did and have done with previous applications within the parish. Therefore, we objected to this application on the grounds of the size of the development, which effectively would increase the housing in the village by between 18 and 20%, the impact to nearby listing buildings, as shown on the previous maps, the fact that technically the site currently is outside the settlement boundary, and also residents' comments and concerns regarding traffic through the village. Having said all that, the parish council was impressed how the developers went about creating the final application. They worked very closely with the planners and Suffolk Highways, whilst presenting their plans at regular intervals to the parish council and local residents, inviting comments and suggestions to support and enhance the village going forwards. In addition, the housing types and sizes are of benefit to the parish and will encourage first-time buyers and downsizers alike to move to the village, again supporting the community in the longer term. The Parish Council also supported the development of the sports facilities, which we feel is very important, as they will undoubtedly benefit the parish through the use of the clubhouse, the reconfigured sports facilities has been described, as well as supporting the development of youth sport locally. So in conclusion, we objected, but the Parish Council certainly sees the merits of this application. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions for the Parish Council? Yeah, Councillor Mullen.
Do you have a village hall outside of this development?
We have a village hall which is at the other end of the village, and that is used on a regular basis, both during the day and in the evenings, both locally and by groups outside of the village, yes. It has no licence, drinks licence, can apply for temporary licences, but it is well used.
Any other questions? No. I'm just going to put you on the spot a bit, but because that's a hard conclusion for us to sort of sum up. So it sounds as if you're torn between the fact that it is such a large development, but obviously it's bringing substantial benefit. And so would you want to guide the committee any more on the Parish Council's overall view? Because we do take, we take the view of the Parish Council as the people on the ground in the community.
Yes. Again, it's a very difficult thing. I'm chair of the Parish Council. I have a personal view, and I have to remove that personal view from the Parish Council's view. The Parish Council sees great merit in it, which is why I've spoken today. We did object, but we see great merit in it because we want to keep the village alive. We want to keep it moving forwards, as do the developers, we believe. What we object to is the principle that it's a large development, but it needs to be a large development to support the aspirations of the football club. We also have concerns that this may set a precedent for the future. Now, I know that planning decisions are made in isolation, perhaps. However, we don't want, as a parish and as residents, for the village, which is over 1,000 years old, to suddenly become a small town. And this being the start of it. Development, 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 development. So that for us is a concern. This in isolation, we feel would effectively build out the village. And if you could promise, cross your heart and hope to die, that there would be no more development once this development had gone through, then perhaps we would be satisfied with it. It's a very difficult.
I think that's very well put, and I think we're all sensing what you're saying. I mean,
yes.
it's a real balancing act for the community. Yes. I can see that because you've been given something versus.
Yeah. But it's not a straight objection, and we don't want this, and we'll lay down in the streets and stop the bulldozers.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not
I think that's very well explained. So thank you for that. That's very useful. Yes. Do you want to have a question?
Just a very quick question. The clubhouse would presumably have a drinks licence. Would it be the only place in the village that has a drinks licence, and would you expect that it wouldn't be just footballers who would be using the clubhouse, but it would be more of a social club?
I can't answer the question with regards to the drinks licence concretely, but I believe it will have an alcohol licence. It is the only place in the village that has or will have a drinks licence. The village hall can have temporary licences, but that's it. There's no other facilities. My belief and the parish council's belief is people will migrate to the clubhouse and use it as more of a community hub. And that is the hope, that it will be used as a community hub. And then it then develops from there. That's my opinion. I haven't spoken with the football club to say that is what they will do. But
we can ask the applicants about the licensing when they go. No, but we've got the applicants, so they're next, or the agent.
That is my hope and aspiration for it.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Thank you. So next up, we don't have an objector, we don't have a supporter, but we do have the agent, Andrew Chalish. So if you'd like to come up, please. And again, if you could keep to the 3 minutes, please.
Firstly, I'd like to thank the Chairman and members for the opportunity to say a few words in support of my client's proposal, and to thank the officers for the thorough report and for their constructive approach, both pre and post-submission of the planning application. I was, from the outset, pleased to be asked to promote this development, as having been a planning consultant for over 30 years, it's a fine example to me as to what planning should be about. Delivering much needed development in a way that brings substantial benefits to a local community. It is a proposal that not only provides much needed housing, but also provides a significant improvement in sporting, recreational and community facilities, safeguarding and enhancing the future of Stonham Aspal Football Club. First, the proposal provides a mix of small and medium-sized dwellings, not exclusive or executive in the modern parlance, but good quality, well-designed homes that will appeal to and can be afforded by a broad cross-section of the community. The proposal also includes 4 affordable houses, specifically designed to meet the identified need for Stonham Aspal, as advised by the Housing Enabling Officer in pre-application discussions. Second, the proposal provides for enhanced sport and recreational facilities, including new pitches, training area and a sports community building. Without the provision of these, the football club will likely fold, as explained in Stonham Aspal FC's needs statement, which accompanies the application. The provision of these high-quality facilities will be a significant benefit to the local community, and the applicants and the football club believe that the club will be able to enhance its role within Stonham Aspal, particularly through the encouragement and expansion of its youth teams and opportunities to increase participation. It's hoped that residents and the many community groups within the village will become involved in the club and also make use of the new facilities. The sports community building will provide a modern, welcoming and functional space for community use. And the applications are keen to deliver the substantial benefits of the scheme, phase its delivery to ensure that football activities can continue seamlessly, and that the new facilities come forward promptly. I therefore ask members to accept the officer's recommendation and grant planning permission for this exciting development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got a question to start off with. Could you just, you've talked about the football clubs being up against it at the moment. How can you assure the committee that giving them all this extra liability in terms of running a building, taking on a car park, how can we have confidence that's not going to appear again in 12 months when they'll suddenly say, well, hold on, we're in the same position again? Is there any confidence you can give that this is going to give them longevity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it puts them in a completely different situation vis-a-vis Sport England and the ability to obtain grants ongoing in the future. I mean, at the moment, they can't obtain grants from any of the sporting bodies because they've not got a permanent building. So that will be a quantum leap for them that we think and they believe will help them to sustain themselves for, well, as far as we can say, the foreseeable future.
So it's the clubhouse is the key bit.
It's fundamental,
yeah,
absolutely fundamental.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Mansell.
Thank you. I've got one question that hasn't arisen from other bits of the discussion, and that is, what is the sort of catchment area for the participants of Stonham Aspal Football Club? Is it mainly in Stonham Aspal, or do they come from the wider community? With reference to some of the other questions that have already been asked this morning, I'd just like to know what yours and the applicants' views are on the suggestion of solar panels, charging points, pavement widening, and having the affordables in phase 1.
Okay. I think in terms of where the club draws its players from, I think at the moment quite a considerable number do come from outside Stonham. That's, I think, primarily because they run adult teams, and that's what they've done for many years. But the whole idea of this proposal is that they build on their youth teams, improve their youth team involvement, and that in itself will engage more with the Stonham Aspal community. We've got a school in the village, so there's real opportunities to get the youngsters involved in the club. You get the youngsters involved, you get the parents involved, you have a wholly different animal in terms of what the club is. So that's the club's aim. The solar panels and the charging points, we all know where we are in terms of the environment today, so it's not something that the applicants or the club are going to resist, obviously, because it's the way that everybody has to be. So where we can put the solar panels, we've got some good south-facing slopes within that scheme and on the pavilion itself. So no issue with that at all. Charging points, again, it's something that responsible developers are putting in. Unfortunately, I act for responsible developers. So yeah, was there another?
There was the having the affordable dwellings in phase 1, and there was also some mention of increasing the width of the pavement across the frontage of the site.
Yeah, well, the footpath does get actually widened at the junction, so there is an improvement in terms of, I think it's 2 metres in terms of the width of the footpath in the immediate vicinity of the access. So, yeah, sorry, what was the other one?
Affordables, putting the affordable dwellings so they're in phase 1.
They can't go in phase 1 because phase 1 hasn't actually got any affordables in it, because you can see how it's been, but there's nothing to prevent the affordables coming forward before, let's say, the 25th dwelling is occupied. Or so it's easy to bring those affordables in right at the start of phase 2. Yeah, very easy. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Councillor Field.
Yes, just really about the issue of foretelling the future, what will be built. Are there any other sites in Stonham in our local plan as it's emerging, or I'm not familiar with the pictures of that particular village?
This is the only site allocated within the emergent joint local plan within Stonham Aspal.
Any other questions for the parish council? Sorry, for the agent? No. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So we now move on to the ward member, Councillor Susie Morley. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I have a big concern about the width of the footpath along the frontage of the site. It's a very narrow footpath, and it's right on the edge of the curb. And for the lorries that go down there, their wing mirrors are just at head height. So given the nature of this development is likely to be young families walking to the primary school, I do have a lot of concerns about that footpath. And if it could be widened such that people could walk closer to the hedge line as opposed to closer to the road line, that would be a real benefit to the whole village. But having said that, I really like this development. I've been really impressed with the way the agent has engaged with the parish council and the residents. I think it would be a fantastic benefit to the village, and I fully support it.
Thank you. Any questions? No. Okay, so members, we've had all the information put before us. We've heard from the parish council, we've heard from the agent, we've heard from the ward member. It's up to us now to discuss, debate and to come to a conclusion. Can I just ask a question? We've heard the footpath mentioned quite a few times. but Suffolk Highways are saying that they're content with the existing. How could we as a committee deal with that? Could we put in a suggested, what have we called it in the past? A informative note, that's the word, thank you. Informative note on that if we go down that direction, or how can we pick up some of the concerns?
If you don't mind if I just pick over this slightly. When we talk about this footpath, we're talking about just within the site frontage of the application site?
Yeah.
Right, okay. And in terms of, this is where I'm going to ask Dan a few questions, in terms of the footpath along the frontage of the site only, all of that is within the ownership of the applicant and Red Line. So and this is a full application, so we have layout as part of the discussion, appearance and so on. So it isn't like an outline where we can maybe come to this later. You know, this is what the proposal is. So the footpath as currently set out, how wide is it, just to confirm?
I don't know how, it's not the full width.
I don't know how wide it is, but from being on site and walking it, it doesn't appear to be full width as required by standard, but then it was implemented prior to
And this is right
standard.
on the edge of the road, so the concern here is the way that cars, lorries and so on travel through. And having gone up and down that road many times in the last 15 years, I do appreciate that point. Every single front garden, as I look at the layout plan, has quite a reasonable frontage to it. I don't see there any harm in looking at pulling back potentially that path, either keeping the same width but pulling it back by half a metre or so, just to give that extra.
I think then you'd have to take out the hedgerow.
But you'd have to take out the hedgerow? Yeah, so there's a hedgerow in the way there. But then we're dealing with the frontages of these gardens anyway, so there's a compromise there to look at.
Well, let's discuss and debate, see what members think. I mean, there is a compromise because the problem is there's a hedgerow there. So to widen the footpath, you're going to damage the hedgerow. So we can't. Whatever we do, none of it's...
It might be, if it's the, let's go for the debate I would suggest, but if it's the only thing that causes a concern, it might be something we delegate us to resolve before issuing a decision, potentially.
Okay. So we've got some hands up. We'll start down the end first. Councillor Mayor.
Regarding the footpath, I have a slight concern in my mind if the width of the footpath were wider along the frontage and it then narrowed. Are we not introducing an issue there in that people are on a nice wide footpath chatting away, they don't realise that it's narrow? Will we not be better off to have the footpath the same width all the way along?
Yep, Councillor William.
Chair, thank you. When we looked at the photograph, it seemed to be narrower along the frontage than it was in the sort of foreground of the photograph. So, I mean, what I would suggest was if we could achieve a 1.5 metre footpath, which is not much of a widening, but it would. 1.8 is the standard, yeah, I know, but in a rural area, 1.5 would just about allow a buggy in each direction to pass. And for most of the length, people would be able to walk at the back of the footpath. So rather than, I mean,
Can I suggest, because we haven't got the measurement here, we don't know how much we've got between the green area. Let's debate it. If the footpath is the number one issue, we could put an advisory note in there that we feel the footpath should be widened to a minimum of 1.5 metres, ideally 1.8, but to a minimum of 1.5, and have it as an advisory note, because it's very difficult for us here today to really know what's there, and we need some experts out measuring, and then we're very clear in our messaging by putting an advisory note in, and then we leave the officers to, and if the officers are unable to secure that, then we want to hear back, or something like that, so that it doesn't just get lost in the wash. It might be a way forward. Yeah. But we haven't reached any conclusions yet. We're still on the foot. Yes, Councillor Haddingham.
Well, I'm happy to. I think it's a really good application. I think they've engaged with the community. They've engaged with the parish council. You know, there's a lot of single-storey houses there, and so I'm happy to propose that we go along with the officer's recommendation for approval.
Councillor Muller.
I would like to support Councillor Hanningham's proposal. However, I do have reservations about the football club taking on full responsibility for the management and repair of the whole site, including the car park. Basically, as someone who chairs a CIC who has a football pitch, and I've known the issues that football clubs have had trying to raise funds, as the chair reiterated earlier. But apart from that, I do actually support it. I think that the fact that the residents of the village have been sort of consulted at all stages, as well as the parish council, it'll be a great investment for the village. It will improve it considerably for facilities, etc. So I do fully support it.
I'm told that there is a footpath on the other side of the road that is wide enough, just so that we're aware. That if you look at the other side of the road, there is a footpath that meets the width. So anyway, okay, so Councillor Mansell, you were next.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank all the people who've spoken about this application, because I had a number of queries about it, and I'm a lot clearer in my thought processes. So I'd like to thank everyone, including the people speaking from the public gallery. It has been quite helpful to have all that information. And I am very pleased to hear the parish council say that they thought that the applicant had liaised well with them. I think that is lovely to hear that, because so often we don't hear things like that. I did have quite a lot of doubts about this application, but having heard from all the various parties, I think perhaps it is actually a suitable development for Stonham Aspal. I have concerns about the pedestrian accessibility, and you know, if it is possible. I mean, that photograph actually, I mean, maybe it doesn't give it justice, but it looks like a narrow pavement that is slightly overgrown at the edges anyway, which makes it even narrower. So if there is any way it is possible to widen it, I would welcome that. I would also welcome a condition, I know there is a condition about sustainability measures, but it's not really mentioned in the report. And I would like to see some solar panels especially put on the clubhouse, you know, and possibly charging points and possibly solar panels on some of the dwellings. The officer did say they could be fitted at a later date, but everyone knows it's so much cheaper to put them in when they're being built rather than retrofit. So I would like to see those in. I would also like to see, as mentioned by the agent, that if there are no affordables in phase 1, I would like to see some condition about the affordables being like the first bit of phase 2, because it is always one of the worries for a community that they get the development and then the affordables are never built. And this does suffer from having a reduced proportion of affordables in it anyway because of the viability issues. So I would like to see a better guarantee that those affordables are going to be provided sooner rather than later. You know, all in all, I am in favour of this development, but I'll just wait to hear what anyone else is saying. I'm not sure it has been seconded yet anyway. Oh, it was. Sorry, I thought you just said he supported it. Okay. You know, with those provisos about perhaps some stronger conditions and more conditions, I'd probably be happy to support it.
So I'm just going to ask John to comment about the solar panels, and with reference to the fact that it's already in here where it says outline sustainability measures, just so we're absolutely clear. John.
In terms of the solar panels, if members so wished, to specifically, because of course what it's asking for is a scheme, but if your intention is to ensure that includes solar panels, we can adjust the wording to that effect, so that any scheme that comes forward to be agreed includes a degree of solar panels. That we can do. That's relatively straightforward. Just picking up on the affordable housing point, a little bit of caution because I don't know how the viability works in this scheme. I haven't looked at the viability assessment, so I don't know if putting a trigger point in would upset any kind of capital flow of money or what have you. But it is not unusual that within the 106 agreement for the affordable housing that we would have a trigger point based on the number of houses constructed. So in this case, I would suggest 30 would be the best point to assure that viability isn't affected. I hope that's a safe position to go forward on. It is round about 50% normally of developments where we put forward the affordable housing to kick in, and I wouldn't expect anything less here. So I would, if you're looking for us specifically to find a trigger point, rather than leave it to the lawyers ultimately, then I would suggest around 30 houses would be the point I would ask for.
How many are affordable out of 46, remind me?
Sorry, how many we've got affordable houses?
So it's 46 units in total, 4 affordable units.
Four, right.
So that's not.
So that means that 30 market units can be occupied before.
We could reduce it down to 25, but I don't want to get into the.
So in terms of the phasing, 19 units would come forward as part of phase 1 along with the sporting facilities. The suggestion is that they would all be open market because they would be used to cross-fund the development of the sports pavilion and the pitches. In terms of the affordable units, we could look at 25 units so that there is one open market unit delivered on phase 2 before the affordable units, or we could look to give greater leeway and say you've got provision of the 4 affordable units prior to the occupation of the 30th unit.
Any of those options are legally or sound, yes.
I would probably lean more towards the 30 because just to allow for any unexpected issues, but 25 is an option if members want to take that forward. I'll leave that with members.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got to be careful. We've heard the viability is tight here. We don't want this to loot the thing. So, I mean, but it's up to the proposer and seconder. What would you be happy with? 30?
I'm happy with 30.
Yeah.
I'm happy with 30.
Okay. Well, I saw the applicant nodding at 30. And looking a bit less nodding at 25. So I think that's the indicator. Yeah, Councillor Wellham.
Chair, I'm not quite sure where we are with the 1.5 or whatever footpath. Are we able to put that in as a condition?
No, I'm going to put it in as an advisory note that we would like to see the footpath at a minimum of 1.5. Are you happy with it being an advisory note for 1.5 as proposer and seconder? Yeah. Is there anything else members would like to discuss before we go to a vote?
Could I just ask, are we leaving the sustainability measures as is, or are we going to put something in? I'm not sure whether the proposer and seconder.
Well, we're just going to. John's just going to go. We're just going to go through the recommendation, check everyone's happy, and then take a vote. So the recommendation, as laid out on our page of our papers on page 38 and 39. With the additional points that John's now just going to read out.
So, as recommendation, with the additional offering from officers, which is electric charging, just to clarify, electric charging would be 1 per dwelling, and a scheme for charging for the sports football club pavilion to be agreed. So that's the charging side of things. We've got a trigger point that's been put into the 106 in respect of 30 dwellings. And I've got an advisory note for 1.5 metre footpath frontage to seek to be achieved. The solar panels, I don't know if that was picked up as proposed or second. I didn't hear that.
Well, what would you put in, and then we'll ask the. Hold on, let's just.
I'd be happy for solar panels to be part to your condition. Where am I on? No, the 5th bullet point down takes outline of sustainability measures to be utilised during construction and incorporation of renewable energy and sustainable measures in the use of the dwellings. And we want to add to that line that shall include solar panels. Is that? And the pavilion. Okay, yep, that's fine. So and shall include. So that's all I've got so far, sir.
I think that's clear for everyone. So we're going to go to a vote. All those in favour of the recommendation that's just been read out, along with those on 38 and 39 of our papers, can we have a show of hands? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so we're now going to move on to item 7B, which is the application in DC 190266. Outline planning permission of 5 dwellings and associated garage and vehicular access on the south side of Rags Lane, Woolpit. Okay, and over to the officer to present.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I will present you the application today for land on the south side of Rags Lane in Woolpit. The application is an outline application including access and layout. We don't normally have outline applications that include layout. This one does.
Other side, Jamie.
Apologies. Thank you. So we'll just start on a large aerial view. So obviously this is Woolpit area, and the site there is just etched in purple. I'm just zooming in a bit further. We can see that this built form, obviously to the north, we have three houses, along this part, and another one here on this side of the corner. We have built form that runs along here. Trying to get used to the mouse here, all the way up to this part of the corner here. There is one dwelling there, and that's a line ribbon development all the way to the centre. And we also have some housing here. So just so no one's confused, this is actually, this is Rags Lane here that runs along the north part, and this is Drinkstone Road that runs along the southern part. Showing a constraints map, we can see in the lighter purple on the right hand side of the screen there, that is actually the conservation area of Woolpit, and this darker line that follows along here around the back of the dwellings that I pointed out previously, and along the front of the site and down this side, capturing those three dwellings, there is the settlement boundary of Woolpit. I'd also like to indicate at this point as well that the neighbourhood plan incorporates the site as local green space, but the neighbourhood plan at this stage is at very early pre-submission. It's due to go to examination on the 7th of February. We'll come back to that in a little while. This is a block plan of the layout of the site. So we have two dwellings at the front with detached garages, served off its own private access to that side. We have an access on this side for vehicles off the Drinkstone Road. We then have three other dwellings further into the site as the road meanders round with a bit of green space along that side of the road. And I've just indicated there with an arrow, because it's not quite clear, we will zoom into it in a little while, but there is a cycle and pedestrian access only onto Rags Lane. And the reason, just to highlight at this stage, the history of the site, some members may be aware, we've had a refusal on this site for 60 and 45 dwellings previously. The main reasons for those refusals was that Rags Lane could not support pedestrian and cycle usage for that number of dwellings. Highways are now very satisfied that only 5 dwellings Rags Lane can support the pedestrian and cycle usage onto Rags Lane. And I will just skip back to that actually. I will go into a little bit more detail. There's some annotations down here. These are to do with some improvements along Drinkstone Road. And again, we will zoom into that in a little bit further into the presentation. So I've put a picture up here just to indicate, and there's an arrow. You'll see a lot of this as we go through the slides. That point of the arrow is where we're kind of facing, so give you an idea of where these photos are taken. This is inside the sort of centre, on the left-hand side, just behind where this picture is taken is where the co-op is, and this is the entrance into Rags Lane here. So this is where pedestrians and cyclists would emerge from. We're going to wrap round and see the front. That is the same entrance that we were just seeing of Rags Lane. And you can see why 60 houses or 45, there's a bit of a pinch point in there, and we can understand why we wouldn't want that many cyclists and pedestrians walking down there. That just shows us where that exact pinch point is. And we'll just move further along, as you can see with the arrow where we're facing down in Rags Lane here. So we'll just move a little bit further. So we've got just the left-hand side of this hedge road is the penultimate dwelling, and you can just see the driveway there of the last dwelling, and then the start of the hedgerows of the north side of this site here. I hope that's clear. That's just pretty much exactly where we were, but doing a 180 and looking back up towards Woolpit. You can obviously see the church spire there in the distance. So we've just gone the other side of the north side of the site, and again looking back towards Woolpit, and this is pretty much where the pedestrian access would be inserted into this part here. So any pedestrians or cyclists, those photos we've just seen, would use Rags Lane to get into the services available in the centre of Woolpit. So then, just zoomed in a little bit further, that is the pedestrian and cycle access, and if I just skip back, if we just note that tree there, from my site visits, I believe that to be that one, so it's just going to be on the left-hand side of that tree there. We've got the two larger ones there and one just to the right here. So that's just going to go next to there. So further along Rags Lane, looking back across the site, as you can see where the arrow is in the top left there, you can start to see the dwellings that are quite prominent on this area here. And to the right-hand side, we've got the dense hedgerow, which formulates the northern side of the site as a whole. So the next set of photos that I'll take you through is along Drinkstone Road. So just to indicate here that we have the passing bay introduction here is one part of an improvement. We have localised widening of Drinkstone Road around here, and we have the tapered widening of Drinkstone Road, which is associated with the access point into this side. And just on the other side of the access, again, we have the tapered widening, which allows for the access. The access, these red hatchings here note the visibility splays, but what we'd normally see in an access is that it would just come out straight like this, but we can see here that with this tapered widening, we have an improvement to Drinkstone Road, and that's to 5.1 metres. And then just to add on the last bit there is an existing, and we'll see a photo in a second of a passing bay there, but that's a bit of a muddy one, so we will be improving and formalising that under the Section 106 agreements. I haven't skipped over the hedgerow and everything else. This will come later on in my report, because this is one of the main considerations as part of this application. So just to look along Drinkstone Road, we can just see the roof of the first house here. And we'll move along. This is an existing site access at the moment, which is, like I say, halfway along there. They're not utilising that. That will look to be stopped up, and a new access input in further along. So it's only to do with that purple hatching as the site. We can see here that there is an existing passing bay there. That will be used to use some of the formalising of the widening of the road, as indicated earlier. And I've just kind of shown there, this photo was taken back in June 2019. The application has been in the caseload for a little while. Just so you can see, this was literally taken on Thursday last week. We can see the significant difference of what it looks like in the winter months compared to what it looks like in the summer months. And again, this will form some of the more detailed analysis that we have about the hedgerows as a whole. I'll come to that. So we've gone on the other side of Drinkstone Road now, and we can see that these are some of the dwellings that come out of Drinkstone. So what we can see here is we've got a few dwellings here. We've got some paddocks where this photo is taken here, and then we've got the overall meadow here, which has got the hedgerow along the front, and then more dwellings this side. So we can quite clearly see that this is a very transitional period out of Woolpit and into the wider countryside, open countryside. So houses, paddocks, meadow, houses, we can see that that is a transitional phasing out of the settlement. We can just see here as well that there is another passing bay here. This is the one that was indicated to the right-hand side of the access that will be formalised. At the moment, it's not a formalised passing bay. So we've got some improvements along Drinkstone Road in terms of the highway. And again, on the left-hand side, you can see that we do have, on the photo at the bottom here, left-hand side, we can see that we've got all these open countryside fields. On the right-hand side, we have very large trees, hedgerows that make up part of the character that goes out of Woolpit. And again, this photo, June 2019, and the winter one, just to give you a really good indication of the difference of what we're looking at. Again, these photos were taken Thursday last week, these ones in the summer. So you can see what we're looking at there. So this was additional information that was requested from the council. We asked for those hedgerows to be surveyed in a lot more detail. I've just noted at the top there, please ignore the red outline. That red outline does not denote where the development is for this site. That red outline was put forward as part of their arboriculturist report, and I don't think they've got that red outline correct, but that doesn't affect the development anyway. I just don't want anyone to get confused with that, so please ignore that red outline plan. Hedgerows in these blocks are the parts that have actually been surveyed. So H1 quite clearly shows there, that's where the access is pretty much going to come in. The report came back to say all parts of these hedgerows are classed as important hedgerows. So that has a certain number of species within it, and is then suitable as a habitat. All of the hedgerow along this side is going to be retained, other than where the pedestrian and cyclist route coming into here, all of this is going to be retained. And as you've seen, and we will just quick forward in a second, part of this hedgerow is going to be lost for the new access and tapered in. Their arboriculturist report does ask them to, at the front here where the tapering takes place, to try and retain as much as that back scrub as possible. As a result of losing that important hedgerow, I felt it important that we ask for compensation. Without that compensation, this application could quite easily be refused. As a result, we have now got some sections of new planting, obviously at the front, which will mitigate the character loss in terms of that hedgerow, and also new habitats in there. And as you'll notice on there, it does say to retain where possible, and along there. A very important feature, which I think most people will be happy to hear, this red line all the way along here is a new native species hedgerow to be introduced. You'll notice that that goes round the turning head. So I think there was some talks of objections that this would then open up into the site and allow more development. Well, if we've got a compensated hedgerow that goes right round that, it's going to be very difficult for them to remove that hedgerow in the future, because that will be secured as part of a Section 106 ecology compensation. And then, more interesting, this whole blue area here is going to be put forward as meadow. I understand that obviously at the moment the application site is a meadow, so it might seem a little bit weird while we're allowing a meadow to be replaced with a meadow, but the difference is that this one will be able to be secured as a Section 106 as ecology compensation, because it lies outside of the red line plan but within inside the blue area. And at the moment the current meadow land that's there existing at the moment has no protection on it. That could be flattened any day now, and so that secures, that's the difference between the meadow types, that we're going to have some kind of securing as a legal agreement. And as part of the condition that would be put forward, which I will come into again in a second, is that as part of the reserve matters, our colleagues at Place Services would like to see a maintenance condition put on that, so we understand exactly how that meadow is going to be maintained and looked after in the future, and that will be conditioned such that they would have to do such a thing. So I've just got a couple of photos within the site. As you can see, it's very overgrown scrubland. Literally, that's where the photo is taken, and you can, just see the tops of the houses there, which are the houses that sit right on that corner that will abut the development area. And again, because I was out there again in the summer, that's exactly the same or similar area where I've taken the photo from, and you can just see there. So all of this back dense shrub, hedgerow there will all be retained, because that's this area down this side. Obviously where these houses are going to go, this will be cleared, but then behind me where this photo has basically been taken from, we would look to see that we've got a secured and protected area in terms of ecology and habitats. So just to show you the planning balance, because we have pedestrian and cycle routes into Woolpit, we have housing that is classified as being sustainable as per the NPPF. The Woolpit neighbourhood plan is in its early stages, so limited weight can only be given to that local green space that they have designated. I believe that is policy WPT12, sorry. The proposed site access is within a transitional section leading out of Woolpit. The access will have limited impact on this transitional section, with new planting being introduced, and highways are satisfied with all the improvements sufficient to accommodate the intensification of 5 new dwellings.
Thank you. And that was...
Sorry,
Sorry?
couple more, almost done, apologies. Ecology are obviously satisfied with all the compensation scheme, and they believe that this is adequate to mitigate the loss of the important hedgerow at the front. The Section 106 is to be agreed should this be approved today, and some conditions, titles there that were missed off the report because over the Christmas period we hadn't quite had Place Services final comments done at the point of writing the report that you have before you. So we've got the ecology appraisal recommendation, so everything that in their survey that requests the recommendations of mitigation shall be conditioned that they have to carry out. Prior to the commencement, some further reptile survey and mitigation strategies should be carried out on the site. Ecologies are satisfied with what they've provided so far, that there is unlikely to be any harm towards any protected species. There is no evidence of protected species within the site. And then as part of the reserve matters that you would see come forward after this outline application, should it be approved, would require landscape and ecology management plan like I highlighted a second ago, and also a wildlife sensitive lighting design scheme to go with the plan. So accordingly, there is no sufficient harm that would demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the highway improvements on Drinkstone Road and with the 5 new sustainable dwellings that would outweigh the harm that has been identified in terms of the loss of the hedgerow at the front. So the recommendation is to approve, subject to the Section 106, and I will just put your attention to on page 124, part of the recommendation, because of the neighbourhood plan going to an examination stage on the 7th of February, and I will just read this for verbatim. In the event that the application has not been determined by the time that the Section 106 has been agreed and the neighbourhood plan examiner's report has been published, and B, that report recommends that that particular Woolpit local green space policy is taken fully into account, that the designation and allocation of the application site as green space as proposed within the draft neighbourhood plan, then the application will become back to committee to have regard to the material difference in policy change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to run through that last point because I think it is quite a critical point. So what we're saying is that because the neighbourhood plan is out for examination, out for consultation, and the report is then published, we could have a conflict, could we?
Yeah, I'll happily touch on that.
Just expand.
Based on today, because it's only a consultation period, the neighbourhood plan has very limited weight in our decision making. That said, if you approve today, we have to go away and secure the Section 106. Now, some solicitors can get that done pretty quickly. Some solicitors can take a while to get that sorted. At the point that that is sorted, should that neighbourhood plan have gained more weight and an examination report has been published, Part A, and within that published report, that policy that asks for this particular site to be local green space, albeit it would never be public, it's private land, it's hedgerowed all the way around, you can't access the site, public wouldn't be able to go and walk their dog within it as such. Should both of those come forward, then we would say we will bring it back to you as committee because that is a material difference in policy that is different today. So based on today, that has very little weight to it.
So I guess the question is, the application, well, I can guess my own answer probably, but the reason the application is before us today because others would have timed out. So the application needs to come forward rather than just waiting for that decision, which is due in a few weeks.
It would be unreasonable for us to
It'd be unreasonable for us to wait for that decision. Okay, I think that clears that up. Thank you. So questions? Yes, Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you. Very thorough report, thanks, Jamie. Just a couple of questions. The houses down the end of Rags Lane that you're shown on slide 13, the sort of the ones with the sort of denser, it looks like a bit of the far end of Rags Lane. Are they accessed from Rags Lane, or is that slide 13? Those ones, do they come off Rags Lane, or?
There is no road, sorry, thank you, Rob. There's no road access for them on Rags Lane. My understanding is this Broom Hill Lane, I believe?
That's not right.
No, sorry.
You can't see the road access there.
They come on from this.
They don't come off Rags Lane.
They don't come off Rags Lane. They don't come off Broom
So they come off, the question is, do they come off Rags Lane?
It is.
Off Rags
They
Lane,
do.
yes.
Thank
Mine's
you.
close, there's 40 houses off Rags Lane.
There's 40 houses on that road.
Sorry, yeah.
And I've got a quick... Could you just quickly show where, from Drinkstone Lane, how you get in and out of Woolpit? How does it relate to the village centre and pinch points and all the rest of it?
Yeah, of course. So this, I'll stay on this slide here. Thank you, Rob. So you can travel along Drinkstone Road, and then there's a junction, T-junction here, left into Woolpit Lane. I believe there is a pinch point within that area that's been part of many other applications, discussions that have gone through. I understand that there was a previous application for a lot more houses that it was discussed at length. I'll let John update anyone on that process, but I know that is...
But could you show the route to like the A14 and the sort of the main places?
Yeah. Wrong way. If we just go to that first slide, that's the wider one. So I believe that's the A14 there. So if you come down Rags Lane, you would come to the T-junction at the end, into the Woolpit Centre, and you can go past the church, and I believe you go out this way from memory. Yeah, and then there's the turning point that comes off the A14 there, or you wrap round to a roundabout that's here that goes off into Elmswell, and then back onto the A14 that way.
They do have to go through the pinch point, that narrow bit.
Yes. But Highways are satisfied that we're only looking at 5 houses, that's not an intensification that would warrant a refusal in this instance. I understand that the business park is up this end. There's bus routes into Bury St Edmunds. There's also bus routes into Stowmarket. I don't believe there's direct bus routes into Ipswich. I believe you'd have to either go to Thurston for that or into Stowmarket and on. Obviously Stowmarket has the train station that goes straight into.
It's
yes,
just
and Elmsall, yes, of course.
Any other questions at this point? Yeah, Councillor Mayor, then Councillor Wellham.
Sorry, can we have a little bit more on why is it unreasonable not to delay this hearing until after the neighbourhood plan?
The application's ready today to be determined. We can't just hold off to wait to hear until another policy might come forward. If the application is ready, we need to be deciding it as part of the MPPF. Yeah, and John,
to be blunt, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong in this instance, if there have been extensions granted by the applicant, but the applicant could appeal against non-determination, is that right?
We'll all have a go. Ultimately, thus far, we've been negotiating with the applicant in order to look at various issues which have been explained by the case officer. And at this point, we've got no further need to look at negotiations because we've got the development into a position where we can take it forward. If we were to not take it forward, we would be acting unreasonably in respect of purposely delaying an application to manipulate the situation so that a policy that may or may not be adopted, we don't know what's going to happen at the examination stage. It may get amended at that point, it may get chucked out, you know, it may not include this site, it may include other sites. There are lots of variables there, and we are being unreasonable then to delay it purposely to see what that situation turns out. We would be, as a council, liable to appeal, as mentioned, but of course that appeal would also open us up to costs because we are being unreasonable in our actions in that context. I appreciate we are in limbo on a number of policy issues, but this is the position we are in at this moment in time.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the meadow. Who is going to own the meadow in the future? Is that to be transferred to a management company, to the parish council? How can that be? How is it intended that should be secured and managed?
thank you. The land is all within the applicant's ownership, that whole meadow. I'd like to be able to get the ecology compensation layout in front of me because it would be far better and more appropriate to look at it during this conversation. Bear with me as I flick through. There we go. So the applicant is in ownership of all of this land here. As we go down, the mouse has gone off the screen there, so it comes all the way around that whole infill, if you like. My understanding is that the Section 106 and the conditions that we would ask in terms of the maintenance, it is up to the applicant to maintain it as per those conditions and as per the Section 106 that is agreed. I mean, if councillors today feel as part of the debate perhaps that is not enough compensation, even though our ecologists have said, there's nothing to say that we can't go back to the applicant and have further conversations about getting more area to compensate the rest of the site, whether that then becomes actually an open space for publics to walk their dog, I don't know. If you feel that is not enough compensation, then that's a conversation that perhaps we could have further. At this stage, though, this is what we're bringing forward that we feel, as our professional judgment, is acceptable to allow for the development to take place.
My concern was a bit more to do with who will own it, who will pay for the maintenance of it, and if there is a need for a changed maintenance regime, who would carry that out?
At the moment, it is the applicant. The applicant is the owner. It's up to them to maintain that land. That would be what is agreed within the condition. And the ecologist has recommended that condition goes forward, that they would need to present at reserve matters what the maintenance scheme is, and we would secure that under the legal agreement as well.
John, you want...
Just add to that, sorry, you're not incorrect, but I think I'm sensing where the councillor is going here. Ultimately, this is not a piece of public space where you would have an expectation perhaps that the housing approved would enter into a private management company, make some sort of contribution and then maintain that area. And the reason it wouldn't probably work commercially or anything else, that you wouldn't be able to do that in this case because the people occupying these houses get no benefit out of maintaining a bit of land that they're never allowed to access or enter. So it's unlikely that a private management company would be a way that the applicant would deal with that maintenance issue. They might be able to do that, but that's not an issue for us, that's a commercial decision. Ultimately, the applicant in this case has said that they are capable of maintaining this land in accordance with the condition in 106 that we lay out. The land at this moment in time is being maintained to a certain degree already. Well, what we're talking about here is maintaining and setting this aside as it is and gently maintained for the purposes of ecology, which I think in cost terms is probably a lot less than if it was a public site, and therefore probably within the means of the applicant and any profit that they may make out of this development to maintain for the foreseeable future. Again, at this moment in time, from a planning point of view, we're satisfied that we've got a condition and 106 regime that we can enforce and maintain. We don't entirely know the means how the applicant will do that, but we do have the means to enforce it if necessary.
Thank you. Keep going down the line, Councillor Field.
Yes, there were some questions somewhere about the practicality of the enhancements to Dringstone Road, the formalisation of parking in places, suggesting that land's not within the applicant's ownership, and wondered whether highways are confident that they can achieve those changes. And sort of similar theme, on slide 5, there's sort of an odd area enclosed in red lines at the end of the development on Dringstone Road. I really don't understand what it is. I wonder if someone could explain it to me.
Wrong button. We should really be securing these red lines more often. These denote where the visibility splays are. In essence, highways need to make sure that, as you're aware, visibility splays need to be clear so people can see along there. If it sits outside of the red line plan, then it's not within our control to make sure that stays clear. We can condition to say visibility splays need to be, make sure they're 0.6 metres, what the normal height setting is. It's important that we make sure that we get those within the red line plan so we can guarantee it. And conditions should only be for things inside the red line plan, and section 106 should be outside of the red line plan and normally within the blue plan, blue outline plan. So yeah, those red line plans at the front there denote what the visibility splays are. and I've asked for those to be included to make sure that we can secure it.
But the little area which is an enclosed, tapered triangle.
Yeah. So the road.
What is that?
I can't quite zoom in on these, can I? I think I've got as front. Yeah, I have got a zoomed in one, haven't I? That side. Yeah. So if you can imagine, Drinkstone Road would normally come along here. Oh, can't get the mouse to quite go straight. So the visibility display is taken from 2.4 metres back, and then the dotted line comes up to this point here. So everything beyond to the north of that, you can see it goes all the way to there. So that's capturing what needs to be. So there is a section of that meadow that comes out, not quite, just overlapping the road. So that's capturing that area there in terms of what we need to secure as the visibility space. I don't know if John wants to know. Yeah.
I
John,
believe
did
you.
say
I
you wanted
thought
to add something?
visibility displays were straight lines, and that's clearly got a kink in it.
So the visibility display there is that dotted line. That's where it's taken from 2.4 metres back. The red line is including any area that's within that visibility display, because the visibility display is everything to the north of that, if you like. Because if you're parked there, you need to be able to see everything along there. So that's area that we need to make sure is clear, and at the moment it isn't.
So basically that area in that odd-shaped area is being taken out to create a better visibility.
Yes, or added into the development plan, development area.
Okay.
And the issue are the enhancements to the passing places achievable?
So I think John will come back on the visibility space. Do you want to do that now, and I'll come back on terms of
I was only going to comment. I don't know if I'm going to confuse things now, actually, because I think you resolved that point. But I was just going to say, ultimately, anything within the red line and in the visibility display is declared as the ownership of the site, and ultimately, if it turns out not to be the case, then that's their issue. They're going to have to resolve, because we've got a condition that says that's how it shall be. So ultimately, what we have in front of us is what we feel is going to be achieved. If it's not able to be achieved by the applicant, if there's any other ownership issues, they're going to have to come back and resolve those with us if it's resolvable at all. And that is their risk.
And in terms of the improvements of the highways, yes, Suffolk Highways have dealt with this from the pre-app stage, and Sam in Suffolk County Council Highways was happy that we could do this. This is normally done by TRO, and we can do the Section 106 on that to make sure that it comes forward as part of the development. So the improvements are on highways land, so we don't need to serve notice to anyone. So we're satisfied that we can bring those forward.
One last point, perhaps. The width of the road at that point, where the red dot is there, where your cursor is at the moment, it's quoted as 5.5 metres both sides of it. That looks a heck of a lot less.
I think it says 4.5, just double checking.
If I might just say, this is a rural road, and ultimately does have variations of width along it. So I don't want to be caught quoting all of the length of the road is 5 metres when it's not, because there are variations. And of course, on there's a variation of 5, and it goes down to 4.5, and then goes up to 5 again. It has, not a consistent width all the way along it. I don't know if you want to add anything more to that.
Well, I'll just clarify what those annotations actually say. So that is annotating the visibility display being 2.4 metres back, which is taken from that part, by 85 metres. So it's going from there to there at 85 metres. So that's what that annotation says. This annotation actually says the formalisation of the existing passing bay to make it 5.5 metres across, including the passing bay. That one just denotes what we've already talked about the hatched area, denoting the extensory visibility displays. And then this one here says carriageway width to be tapered down from 6, let me make sure that definitely is, 5.5, sorry, in 20 metres in length. So from there, 5.5 starting, and then it's tapering down. And then on this side, we've got the new access, which is going to be done for, as per the standard Suffolk County Council drawing, which is DM01, which is public drawing. It's a specification of what an access should be. And then we can go back to...
Can you just the numbers there? So you've got 4
Yes.
you've got 5, 4.5, 5.5, 5.5.
There's no 4.5 on there. There's 5.5.
Yeah, the next one.
That one is 2.4
The
metres.
next one.
Sorry, next one there is...
4, 5. Middle of the road.
Ah, in the middle there. Yes. So that's
4, 5.
that's taking it from there. Apologies. I was reading the annotations, not looking at the drawing. Sorry. Yeah, so that one's definitely 4.5 as a measurement there.
And there's 2 5.5s at the end.
Yes. And then I think if we flip back, there is that one as well. Did you want me to go through those annotations as well?
I think we've covered it.
Happily do so if need be.
Okay, we're still going along. Councillor Mellon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and thanks for the presentation. That was pretty clear. A couple of questions. One is you showed a double gateway further along Drinkston Road, which was going to be stopped up and a new one opened. Any idea where the position of that will be, and does it require its own visibility display?
So the new one is the main access that we've been talking about. The old one, I believe, is about here. I think the reason that the applicant, and perhaps this is a question we can ask of them when they come to the stand, if they are coming to the stand, about why they're not utilising this access to ask for the development to prevent us putting a new one in. My guess would be so we don't have development slap bang in the middle of that meadow. We actually have it to one side, closer to where the development line of Rags Lane is, allowing for that to remain as a whole meadowland. They might have a different answer.
So given that we've now got an indicative red line showing a new hedge coming in, how will the applicant access the site to do the maintenance and so forth on the new planting?
I think the turning head was always going to be their option to do such a thing. It might be a case that we're going to retain that access there. I think the new ecology plan that we had as the compensation scheme with the hedgerow going through that is maybe something that's been overlooked in terms of how they now access that site as a whole, because that is something that came in over a consultation period with ecology over the Christmas period. So it might be a case of, if we can find it there. So I think the turning head was always going to allow that for access. It might be now that they retain that access there to be able to access the rest of their meadow. If they do or do not stop that up, that doesn't change what we're proposing here as a recommendation. It's not something that we would ask them to secure as part of a Section 106 to stop that up. If it stays as an access to the meadow, we don't have any problems with that.
Okay, just a further question on the biodiversity. So, I mean, in the papers, we have from Place Services a holding objection dated the 4th of November. Are you saying that that's been removed now and we have their approval?
Yeah, that's correct. At the time that this report was written, we had their comments come back to us on the 6th of January. Apologies, I should have brought that perhaps as a late paper, but if we go back onto the slides, please. I have included, they've basically lifted their, oh, I'm going the wrong way, get these arrows right around. They've lifted their holding objection and they have asked for the 4 conditions, and I've just put the titles in there for ease at the moment, but we've got action required in accordance with the ecology appraisal recommendations. So in essence, what they have submitted as their survey has a whole chapter, I believe it's chapter 6 off the top of my head, which asks, it's their recommendations and mitigations. That's a very common condition that we would put onto approvals, that essentially just says you have to do it as per what your mitigation and recommendations are within your survey. The prior to commencement reptile survey mitigation strategy, Hamish was quite clear in his response on the 6th that that is happy to be conditioned. In examples where we think that it is likely that there is going to be some kind of reptile movements within there, we wouldn't do that prior to determination. Hamish is happy in this scenario that it's unlikely that would be the case, so we would still ask for the surveys to be done, but we're happy because it's a low risk to do it thereafter. The other one is the landscape and ecology management plan, which we've discussed here. They would have to bring that forward as part of the reserve matters, and the sensitive lighting and design scheme. So these have come as part of Hamish. At the time of writing this report, I'd spoken to Hamish. He said he's going to happily lift the holding objection, but he'll give it to me in writing. So I was able to get on with the report over the Christmas period and get that done. And then his comments come in, so I've just added those in there.
Thank you. Yep, keep going along the line. Councillor, anyone else? Councillor Wellham? Yep. We'll come back to the ward members at the end.
This is just a very quick question. It's to do with the pre-application advice. It was given in respect of DC 1901-696. Was that an application for a similar application? Was it for 5 houses, or was that for a larger application, please?
It was for 5. I'm not sure whether or not the pre-app itself was titled to be 5. That was what part of the pre-app discussions were. What is the intensification limit that would be acceptable from a highways point of view? And after many backs and forwards throughout that pre-application process, which I personally wasn't involved in, but that was what was seen as 5 being the acceptable number.
But it was for this site, not the whole meadow?
That's correct.
Or a bigger part of the meadow?
I think as part of the pre-app, they may have brought forward the site and said, here's the site, what is acceptable? We've had 60 refused, we've had 45 refused. What is acceptable? And 5 was what was determined. So anything that came forward thereafter would have to see some significant highways improvements to allow any increase in number. But obviously that's not what's before us today.
So was 01696, was that brought to committee? Was that refused? Was it withdrawn?
Sorry.
It's on page 111 of your report. It says, has the application been subject to pre-app advice? Yes, DC 1901-696.
So a pre-app wouldn't come forward at a committee? A pre-app is...
No, but what did that particular application...
This is the application
this
that's
is the
come
same,
as a result of
this
that
is
pre-app.
it. So we're... Okay, thanks. I still don't quite understand, because this seems to be a different...
Apologies, if I just to clarify the history, obviously we've had a previous application on the site that was refused, which was for far more houses, and that was for the whole of the land there. We have had pre-application discussions since then. As a planning department now, we reference all of our pre-application discussions and we give them a specific reference number. It's the same reference regime as we give a planning application, so I apologise for the confusion in that respect.
Yeah, anyone else? Yeah, Councilman.
So can I just confirm that this site is not included in either extension to the settlement boundary or by means of an allocation in the local plan?
Correct.
Any other questions? No, ward members, you had a question. Yeah.
If we can go back to, I think it's slide 5, which I presume is a scale drawing. I'd just like to clarify that this application, this application is outlined with access and layout secured. Now, the proposed footpath and cycle access to Rags Lane looks narrow. I thought that footpath cycleways needed to be 3 metres. And given that the width of the road, where the little triangle bit we've just been talking about, is 4.5 metres, that path does not look like 3 metres. So can you please clarify if the footpath cycleway link should be 3 metres?
We're going to check.
While they are checking that, again, SEC were involved in that whole process in terms of the Highways Authority, and they gave no objection in terms of the width of that or asked for that to be wider. Or we didn't have any indication from them that that should be secured.
Well, I've got a separate question, but I've got a little bit of information on that on Councillor Mansell's, so I could add that, or I could just go into my question. Okay. If we look at page 156, and slide 5 would also be useful there, I think. Paragraph 3.2, it says that the southern hedge, that's the hedge along Drinkston Road, it will merely need to be finned to form the visibility splays. It will be retained as much as possible. Perhaps only 15 metres will need to be fully removed for the new entrance. Now, we don't seem to have a drawing that shows the loss of only 15 metres of hedge. But if you scale off the slide 5, and that's on page 162, I appreciate that you don't have scale rulers with you here, but I did do this, and you'll quickly see that 15 metres is just the width of the asphalt splay.
Sorry, it's questions.
Yes, I'm getting to it.
Yeah, not points, it's questions.
I have a question, yeah. And so that means that the retained hedge from the ecological mitigation report would run right up to the curb of the new access road, and it's hard to see how that would work. Now, I am coming to my question. Even where the hedge is shown...
Look, we've got to be really clear. You're not allowed to give opinions.
All right, no, that's fine.
You can only ask questions. You can give opinions in your speech.
I was just trying to give you the context to this. Which one is correct? That's the loss of 15 metres of hedge, or the loss, as we're saying, even where the hedge seems to be shown as retained, there's that the losses of over 100 metres. Perhaps I'm not explaining this very clearly, but if you see on that slide, you can see that the splay is going for over 100 metres. 15 metres is only the width of the asphalt splay, the tarmac splay. So my question is, which one is right? And the more substantial question is, which one has been agreed by highways? The loss of the hedge for 15 metres or the loss of the hedge for 100 metres? You'll see that these are very large discrepancies. And on page 120, it says the southern boundary will be lost, which rather makes a nonsense of the new mitigation strategy. So which one has been agreed?
The ecology report, from my understanding, is saying where possible to retain some. This is planning, essentially. We have highways where highways conflict ecology and ecology conflict that, and we have to find that balance. Highways are always going to say they want to, whatever needs to be lost will need to be lost for the visibility splays. So my understanding is, and speaking to Hamish, is that's what the report has done from Geo, has seen that as, if it can't be, this is what the compensation is to reflect that. So we anticipate that the vast majority where that pink area is, is on page 162, which is the compensation one, and I will flick forward, it is the other end of the presentation to go back forward, but we have had that slide on there, which shows the blue area of what will be the meadow, and at the front is some pink squares, pink rectangles, sorry, of what will be the area where new planting will need to be provided. So in answer to your question, I think the easiest way to say is, even if it was all lost, we understand from Hamish, our Place Services, and the Geo survey here, that the compensation given mitigates even if it was all lost within that period. It won't be all lost across the whole site, because it will be vastly retained from there to there. So if we lost it from there to there, the compensation scheme that we have been given, we're satisfied through our consultation that will mitigate the issue.
So are we just saying that the 0.25 hectares of meadow creation, that's the compensation, as part of the compensation of the loss?
Yeah, this compensation has been done against, and I have to admit I'm not greatly detailed in terms of how it exactly works. This is why we use Place Services compensation, as consultees. But DEFRA have a table of mitigation, and that gives units to each individual area of what is an addition and what is being removed. So, for example, and I hope this is correct, that they might say that hedgerow is worth 100 units in total, and we are then being given X, Y, and Z that make up that. I will just add that I have forgotten to mention each house, and it is on that page 162 if you have it, each house has bat and bird boxes on each house, one on each side. So we've got a bat and bird, so that also adds up to the compensation.
Do you have any other questions as to ward members? Anything else? No? No? Okay. Yeah, on the design of the 3 metre cycle path. John.
It's one of those questions that I should know the answer to, and when you go to look it up, you can't find it. There is nothing in the manual for streets that I can find, although saying that, the document has got 146 pages, so bear with me a bit longer and I'll keep looking. There's something in the car parking most recent guide, because that talks about car parking and certain standards. Nothing in the Suffolk Design Guide per se. Ipswich Borough Council have adopted it as a cycle statutory, so they specifically said it has to be 3 metres as a minimum. I'm just trying to work out where they got that from. I presume that's come somewhere from the Suffolk. Well, okay. But in terms of this council and what it has adopted as policy, we haven't actually adopted any of those, but ultimately as guidance, I'm still looking. So it sounds very familiar because that's the one I pretty much had in my head, 3 metres being for a two-way cycle shared position. A one-way is 2 metres and a two-way is 3 metres. I'm just having to go back through my head to work out where I got that from in the first place. So can you bear with me a little bit longer? I'll let the debate go and I will try and find that.
Okay. Any other questions on the presentation at this stage from anyone? No? Okay, so we're going to move on. So we move forward now to the speakers who'd like to come up and for the 3 minutes. First of all, we have from the Parish Council, Julia Evans. Ewans, I'm sorry. If you like... No, it's my pronunciation. I do apologise. And you have 3 minutes from when you start. Thank you.
Armand, thank you. This site is not suitable for housing development for many reasons. The access roads are narrow and without footpaths. The applicant's proposal to alleviate this issue is confused and probably undeliverable. Mr. Curry, a local resident, will speak about traffic and pedestrian matters in more detail. The parish council agrees with what he will say, and from our local knowledge, we can confirm that the village agrees with him also. The site lies outside the village settlement boundary. There is no proposal to change this in the draft local plan or in the neighbourhood plan. And I was very pleased to hear that you all now acknowledge that the statements in the papers which say that the neighbourhood plan is in early stages are incorrect. We are nearly there with our neighbourhood plan, and it is very unlikely, we feel, to change so far as this site is concerned, where it is designated as green space. With several large sites around the village already granted permission, there is no need for housing here. The environmental harm is not outweighed by 5 large houses. The proposed road layout invites the conclusion that further applications for this site can be expected. This site fulfills a vital role as a true wildlife habitat close to the village centre. Now, the District Council officers have clearly been having discussions about ecology recently that perhaps the Parish Council have not been privy to. But we feel that the environmental harm is not outweighed by 5 new large houses. The proposed road layout invites the conclusion that, as I believe Councillor Geek just said, that the ancient hedge line will be virtually destroyed for a good half of its length, not the 15 metres that I believe is referred to in the papers. The site contains a mixture of trees, shrubs, and ancient hedges and rough grass. It may look a bit scruffy, but that is exactly how nature likes it. Wildlife identified on site by local parishioners include jays, green woodpeckers, spotted woodpeckers, kestrel, sparrowhawk, owls, warblers, and yellowhammers, which I'm told are on the red endangered list, frogs, grass snakes, monkjack, and roe deer. It's well known that you can't dig a small hole anywhere in a Woolpit without a newt finding a hole in it fairly quickly. The promise of a manufactured meadow, which we note is outside the application site, and a few bird and bat boxes.
I'm afraid you have hit the 3 minutes, so it'll have to be the final sentence, please.
I'm sorry. The parish councillors of Woolpit urge rejection of the proposal. Without my glasses, I can't see your egg timer, sorry.
No problem at all. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for the parish council at this point? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next up, we have Derek Curry as an objector. Again, if you'd like to come up, and you have 3 minutes as well, please.
Yes, Derek Curry. I've lived in Woolpit for 45 years, 37 of them opposite the proposed site. The site is not appropriate for development because of the destruction of the wildlife habitat, as previously, and the medieval hedgerow, and the inadequate local roads to cope with pedestrians and traffic. So all these are important, but I want to focus on the pedestrians and the traffic. All traffic, including delivery vehicles, etc., would access the site via Drinkston Road, formerly called Plough Lane. By the way, the passing place that's been noted is actually a field entrance. Pedestrians will leave this site via the vehicular access because that is the most direct route to the school and the health centre. There's no pavement in Drinkston Road, and pedestrians would also have to cross Green Road at the infamous pinch point before they reach a pavement at all. All traffic from this site will have to enter the frequently gridlock centre of Woolpit in order to reach the A14 to travel in either direction. In the centre, lorries unload and buses try to get through parked vehicles. Farm equipment also travels through, and I often hope no emergency vehicles are required because the village centre is frequently impassable now. And the situation will also get worse when the 100+ vehicles from the previously approved Green Road site, which is being developed now, come into play. Some drivers from the new proposed estate will try to avoid the pinch point by turning right to enter the village via Broomhill Lane and Rags Lane. The width of Rags Lane is often about 3.6 metres. Cars can pass each other, but only if they go up our drives or up our front banks. Mitre Close has 40 houses, Rags Lane 17, and the bottom of Broomhill Lane 4. That's 100+ cars already, plus cyclists using Rags Lane as part of National Cycle Route 51. There are mobility scooters and existing mums with children in buggies, etc., and now more local pedestrians are proposed. Large vehicles, including oil tankers, block Rags Lane to unload. These have to enter from Broomhill Lane because there's no room to turn in or out at the village centre due to parked vehicles and the 2 listed buildings at the narrow entrance. Huge lorries, including refuse collection lorries, often have to reverse the whole length of Rags Lane. Many of the several hundred workers at Woolpit Business Park use the local lanes for exercise.
I'm afraid you have gone over the 3 minutes. If I could have the last sentence, please.
Thank you. During their lunch breaks, and groups of them are seen in Rags Lane and Broomhill Lane daily. There is no footpath.
Thank you very much. Do you have any questions at all? No? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, we don't have a supporter and we don't have the applicant or agent, I understand, here to speak. No? Okay, so we go straight on to... Yeah?
Can I come back?
And we're going to answer the question that was you asked earlier, and then we'll come on to the ward members.
Okay, so I've gone through that document and I can't find a specific mention of 3 metres as a minimum requirement. There was only one mention of cycle path in terms of a where you have pedestrian and cycle using the same, and where there's the ability to split the path, it recommends 3.3 metres. But I also just would like to point out the response from the Highways Authority as well on this issue. If you turn to page 143, you'll see that there is a specific mention of the footpath link into Rags Lane being 2 metres by 2, so that therefore that would indicate that the path would be 2 metres wide. It's 2 metres by 2 metres, so that indicates that the path itself will need to be 2 metres wide, if that helps. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so as I said, we've gone to the ward members. Councillor Helen Geek and Councillor Sarah Mansell. Over to you. Who wants to go first? Your call.
Thank you. Firstly, I should say that I agree with everything that Mrs Ewens and Mr Curry have said. Last time this site came before committee, it was rejected for several reasons. Those are on page 134, all of which are still pertinent. First of all, the lack of pedestrian connectivity made it unsustainable, not outweighed by providing 45 houses, so presumably even less outweighed by the benefit of only providing 5. Secondly, there was unacceptable highway safety in both Rags Lane and Drinkston Road, again, not outweighed by 45 houses. But if Rags Lane wasn't safe for the inhabitants of 45 houses to walk along then, why is it safe for those in 5 houses to walk along now, particularly, as Mr Curry said, when we have an increased number of pedestrians walking to the village from the expanded business park? Finally, there was inadequate provision for infrastructure, notably affordable housing. Again, this development is similar. There's disagreement, as far as I can see, between officers about this. Page 123 says that affordable housing contribution isn't required, but strategic housing on page 151 says that it is required. And clearly the site's being configured to try to avoid affordable housing. Now, as from the officer's report, excellent stuff about the hedges. We're most concerned about H1, that ancient hedge bordering Drinkston Road, tall, diverse, south-facing, almost certainly medieval in origin. In general, those lanes with their hedges are among the oldest features in the landscape, and this one, Drinkston Road, can be found on the manorial extent for 1567, which is the earliest documentary source we have for Woolpit. So it is likely to be medieval. You can't replace this with modern planting. You can't create afresh the balance that we have at the moment, including those invisible assets like tiny invertebrates and fungi and so on. At the moment, we are in a biodiversity crisis, so we should not risk losing that habitat. It supports countless invertebrates and pollinators. Now, just as you can't replace an ancient hedge, you can't create a 1/4 hectare of meadow to compensate for the loss of half of that green space. This used to be Woolpit's allotments. That latent fertility, that nutrient-rich soil, makes it very challenging to establish a grass and flower meadow. It will involve tearing up literally everything that's there at the moment. As you'll have seen in the Ecological Mitigation Report, it is not maintenance of what is there now. At present, it is not a stable grassland meadow. It's on its way to secondary woodland. Even if eventually that meadow becomes a food source for insects, it won't have the complexity of what's already been there. Now, moving on to highways, you've spent a while looking at Drinkston Road, a good while looking at Drinkston Road. What isn't mentioned in the papers is that pinch point, the vehicular access along Drinkston Road to the A14. Now, the Green Road development, you'll know the one, was refused in 2016 on highways grounds, and an appeal was allowed with the condition that a detailed scheme for highway improvements to Green Road was agreed. This has never been agreed, although construction has already begun on Green Road. Now, I don't want to go into this in detail, it's very time-consuming, but essentially we're still awaiting a design to mitigate that pinch point after, I think, the first 3 designs have been rejected by highways. And surely the Rags Lane site should not be considered until a scheme's been agreed for that pinch point and work has started on it. Now, finally, it ought to be pointed out that this is not just any overgrown field on the edge of Woolpit. The field was, as I said, Woolpit's allotments for nearly a century, as recently as the mid-1980s. And although the community has never actually owned the land, it is special to us. We know it as a place to see wildlife. To Mrs. Ewan's list, I could add the barn owl that I saw the weekend before last. We go there to lean on the gate and rest. We go there to get a view of wildness and nature that's rarely seen in our busy community, and we have a sentimental attachment to that place. Maybe it doesn't count in planning terms, but it does make it ideal for designation as a local green space. This is essentially 5 more large houses in an important wild green space on 2 problematic roads next to an unresolved traffic safety issue. So unsurprisingly, I can tell you I don't support it.
Thank you very much. Should we do both ward members, then we'll have to see if we've got any questions. Councillor Mansell.
Thank you. I too would like to agree with the comments already made by the parish council, the resident and my fellow ward member. About the environmental and highways impacts of this particular development. But I would like to comment on the subjectivity of how much weight this committee are going to put on various policies. That we have the emerging Woolpit neighbourhood plan, which has already been spoken about. We also have our own emerging joint local plan. We have a load of policies in our current local plan which our planning officers tell us are out of date and therefore we can't put much weight on them. We have the MPPF. We also have the refusal notice for the 45 houses on the larger site, that was 00721. We also may want to look at the cumulative impact of other large developments in Woolpit. And I think it is subjective. We've heard the officer's view on how much weight should be given to those things, but it's your decision as a committee to determine how much weight you are going to put on them. So the site is outside the existing settlement boundary, the proposed settlement boundary in our draft joint local plan, and in the emerging Woolpit neighbourhood plan. So effectively, that is development in the countryside, and it still is. Woolpit Neighbourhood Plan Policy WPT 12 lists this as a local green space. I know with the MPs at an early stage, but it has a limited amount of weight, if not, it's not a considerable amount of weight. We're told by our planning officers that we have to discount our own policies, CS1 and CS2, because they're out of date. So we then, therefore, are relying on NPPF paragraph 8, which is all about sustainable development. We're told there are 3 strands of sustainability. Economic sustainability. Okay, we're going to get some temporary benefits during the construction phase, but we can't count that really as economic benefit. The social benefit. What significance? Woolpit's already got a load of housing and is likely to have about 600 plus new homes. So 5 more? What's the difference between 605 and 600 homes to an already thriving community? The environmental sustainability, we've been told about the mitigation proposed. Now, when I read the report, we weren't sure what the final detail was, and we're now told that the police services have agreed that the mitigation is sufficient. But again, I think that's a little bit subjective. Does Woolpit actually need 5 more large houses? Not really. I think there's probably more need for smaller properties and affordable homes, neither of which are going to be in this development. Now, my fellow ward members already mentioned the reasons for refusal for 00721. The environmental harm was not outweighed by the benefits of 45 new dwellings, so I really can't see how it can be outweighed by 5. And we've had lots of talk about the unacceptable highway safety. I am a little concerned about the 2-metre cycleway. Every other time I've asked about cycleways, I'm told there's not enough room because we need 3 metres. And here we are, we're cramming a cycleway between the wall of a garage and a hedge, and it's only 2 metres. I really think that we should be asking for a slightly, if this is going to be approved, 2 metres isn't wide enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for members. Councillor Haddingham.
Considering that in the neighbourhood plan they've put that space down for open space or green space, or whatever they're calling it, because it's private property, is there anything to stop the guy ploughing it up and coppicing the hedges down to this high?
Exactly. This is formal allotment, but essentially it's defined in planning terms as agricultural land. So we could plant the whole site for crops tomorrow. There'd be not a lot we could do about that. That is agricultural land.
Okay, so members, questions for ward members at this point? Yeah, Councillor Field.
Sorry, I just caught the tail end of that question. I understood hedges are protected in agricultural environments, and you're simply not allowed to...
You can I think the point is they could be coppiced. Coppiced.
Forgot I was talking
I think
to
you
a
can
farmer.
count. I think Councillor Haddingham being a farmer would, it's coppice. I think the point is that it's private land. That's really the most important.
But my point is you can't rip a hedge up like that.
Okay, so any other questions for the 2 ward members at this point? No? Yeah, Councillor Willen.
Just one very quick question. Is there a different way to get to the A14 from the Rags Lane, Jinkston Road area? If you were going to Bury St Edmunds, could you get out a different way? And is that used as a rat run when the village centre is congested?
Sorry. Yeah. Yes. You can, in theory, avoid the pinch point by not turning left, turning right, and going away from Woolpit and turning into Broomhill Lane, which is an incredibly narrow, to use, I hope, not too technical a term, a hollow way. It's you can't ease off. Sorry?
Sunken Lane.
Sunken Lane, thank you. And is currently causing problems at every parish council meeting because there are lorries going up and down it, eroding the earth part, which is then leading to the drains blocking. So people do go up and down there, but again, it's full of pedestrians. It's a very unusual and interesting lane, and it's not one that we should.
On the way to the business park.
Yes, it's the one that the business park is close to, and it's recently had restrictions placed on it, and there's discussions around other restrictions to try to stop people using it.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? No? Okay, members. Well, we've had all the information put before us. We've heard from the parish council. We've heard from a resident, an objector. We haven't heard from a supporter or the applicant. Obviously, we've heard from the 2 ward members. And we've had the case presented to us. So over us to discuss, debate and to reach a conclusion between us somehow. Yes, Councillor Mellon, straight off.
Thank you, Chair. So I have a real concern about what appears to be a discrepancy in the environmental report by GEO. And I'm looking at the plan on page 162, which shows the sort of improved environmental mitigation measures. And it's small print, but I think it says existing hedging and trees within visibility space to be removed. And I think this goes back to the point that Councillor Geek made earlier. And if you turn over to the table on page 169 with the sort of biodiversity metric calculation grid, it's a bit of a struggle for those of us who are not familiar with these things, but it appears to be that the native species-rich hedgerow has 259 metres of length, and that gets diminished to 244. So that's the 15 metres we talked about. So there's clearly a discrepancy between what it says on the plan, which is a much longer area of ancient species-rich mature hedgerow to be ripped out, and the amount they've actually used in their calculations. And I struggle to see that place services have done a correct job in their calculation of the sort of net benefit of the plantings and so forth. So that leads me to be heading in a direction of being against this development at this stage of the debate.
Yeah. I think we've got to be careful. Because John, do you want to just come in on that point?
I'll have to look at this again, but it depends on what is defined as the protected hedge in terms of the protected species, and I'm not sure if those 2 calculations add up, because not all of the hedge is regarded as protected, but I'm not sure because I'm not an expert in that regard. So I'm guessworking here of why there's a difference, but ultimately, for the purposes of planning, the extent of hedgerow is clear on the plan, and the plan would be the one I would take forward. If you consider that to be inappropriate, and the mitigation that's also on the same plan, that would be a debate that you would need to consider.
I'd just like to point out that on page 169, and I'm terribly sorry I didn't pick this up before, the figures, which presumably are in the table, it then says on the right-hand side, site, land at Dabbs Hill Lane, west of Perth and Huntington Close, Northolt. That isn't in Woolpit, as far as I'm concerned. Are these figures actually the correct figures?
So basically, well, very well spotted, and thank you for pointing that out, because that's very important. No, so what we will have to do is defer this, bring it back next time. We'll need the GO here, just to confirm whether this is
Matthew,
or a report from them.
Unless we carry on with some other...
Do you want to turn the mic on?
It's up to you, Chairman and members, unless we carry on. I know this is a bit messy, unless we carry on with some other business and attempt to get something by email and phone by a colleague while we're doing that.
No, because, you know, from where I sit, I think both the ward members have raised points about the report that we're not 100% confident in. And I think to just get an email just confirming yay or nay isn't. I think we need them here, or we need someone here to try and talk it through from Place Services, would be my take.
Okay, thank you. Bear with us. So essentially, given the reference within the applicant's details that they've submitted to us appears to refer to a different site. Now, whether that is a cut and paste error or anything else, I would say that there is sufficient risk that our experts who have looked at the information have potentially not looked at the right report or the right table. On that basis, I would recommend to members that there is if you made a decision based on that information and that potential error, you would be potentially open to a judicial review risk, and I would therefore urge consideration of deferment on that basis.
That's what I'm saying, yeah. They would not feel comfortable, so I think we need that it's deferred, and we need to come back with a greater clarity on that point. Yes, Councillor Haddingham.
I'm happy to propose that we defer it.
Yeah. Second. Is everyone in favour of that?
Can we make sure everyone is shown?
Can we have a show of hands? Everyone in favour of deferment on that basis? That's unanimous. Thank you. And I do apologise to members of the public not to have had that, but I think it's really important that we get this right and we don't make a decision on part information that we're not 100% sure on. So we'll take a quick 10-minute break and start again at 12:15. Welcome back, everyone. And again, apologies. I don't like to pull something, but if it's not right, we've got to do it. So, moving straight on to agenda item 7C, and this is at Lawn Farm, Warren Lane, Woolpit, application number DC 1903500. And over to you, Mark, to present.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members and everybody else. We've got two applications with us for this site, and I think I should explain the background to it because although they're procedurally two applications, they do inform each other. Members may recall granting permission for business uses at Lawn Farm in the summer of 2018. At the time, a condition was imposed at committee which referred to variously a 10-metre bund or buffer. The wording was loose, but actually it was a buffer, a planting buffer of 10 metres in width. At the time, the applicant did express a bit of concern about it hampering matters on site, but did duly discharge that condition in order to begin works on site. What they're asking today under this application, if that condition could be varied, which would remove reference to the 10-metre buffer. So we'll talk about that first. And the second application then seeks to increase employment use on the site with 3 further parcels of land nearby. So let's go through the slides. Let's use the right piece of equipment. Okay, so there is the site in question. Hopefully you're familiar with it. You've got the A14 just to the left, to the west of Lawn Farm. The shape of the site in question you can see is an upside down L shape. And to the left and right are the parcels that we'll be talking about next. But this application relates to the shaded area only. Point of reference, it's obviously near major road networks, the A14, the old A14 as well. The old London Road, should I say, as well. And to the bottom right corner, you can see just a few buildings. There are 3 dwellings nearby, 2 of which are listed. Okay, so in 2018, members granted permission for what you see before you now. So the buildings on the left were granted full permission. The top left one has been built out. Members may have seen it. It is quite visible. It's a mixture of white and sky blue colours. That's been built out and is being used. The southern building, they're about to break ground on that. They're just at the end of sorting out the contract for that. And as reported on the tabled papers, the site to the right, which has outline permission, is subject to a reserve matters application, which we've just received, and notifications will go out for that shortly. So, just to talk you through it, that's being occupied, that's about to be started on, that's about to be applied for as well. But what we've also got coming up are top left there, parcel 1, parcel 2, and then over to the west, parcel 3. So the landowner wishes for the business park to be built out, and that is how they hope it will end up, should they be granted permission. I'm just going to show you a view of Lawn Farm as one would see it from the A14. That's the main viewpoint. Excuse me. So we're coming from the south here, and it's over on our right there, over on the east. So it's screened in parts, but then is open in parts as well. I had to go over the other side of the road for this because there was a Eddie Stobart lorry in the way, but still going along the same way. And then coming back, going southwards, it's on our left now. Did I say left earlier? I meant right, sorry. Shall I go back? No. Have I confused anybody? No, fine. Okay. So there it is, basically. It's exposed on the left, and then you go down towards the south, it's planted out. Now, I need to point out a few things here. Is it with this? This one. Is this one? Yeah. The planting in contention, basically, is this here. It's the 10-metre buffer, referred to in places bund, but forget the word bund. There's no bund in this scheme. Goes up all the way to the spine of the development like that. Details of this have been submitted and the planting has been begun, but the problem is, that this section here would hamper access to these 2 parcels here. So the black dots you see there are no longer planting. They are sort of lawned area, but will have a public right-of-way over it. This is a public right-of-way, so that's kept as such. So there's not any planting there. The applicant is asking if that can be removed. I say removed, you know, not put into stone. And also this section here can be thinned to about 6 metres. So that will make it easier to operate within these parcels of land. The compensation for that is actually a net gain in specimens, a net gain in acreage of planting, which would be here, where the width of that is about 28 metres, and down here, where the width is about 30 metres, tapering down to, as you can see, nothing, just a point at the bottom there. And also hedgerow planting here. I heard Councillor Geek earlier speaking about loss of hedgerow, so we can give you, hopefully don't use too much hedgerow there, but we can give you 150 metres of hedgerow here. Okay, so just to confirm that the applicant is asking to reduce that planted belt from 10 to 6 metres, is giving up to 35 metres depth here, 2 metre planting here, it could be a bit wider actually, to be honest, up to 28 metres depth here, and that belt would be lost, so you could then open up access to proposed sites 1 and 2.
It's not planted.
Well, it had been begun. I must admit, I don't know how far they got with it. I've got photos of the other application which show some of the planting having been done. I just want to give you an aerial photograph as well, so you can see the aspect as it is at the moment. So we've got the Stag Cafe there. This is all wooded. There's a little bit of planting there, but basically the proposal is to put a thick belt here, and then the thinner belt there, and then not there at all, and then hedgerows along here. Also to mention are the residential dwellings which I mentioned earlier, which include lawn farm cottage, and the relevance of this is we've just been successful at an appeal for some housing in this site here. The applicant wanted housing where there are business units at the moment, a scaffolding company is operating, and we resisted because we feared there may be conflict between a proposed use here and increased residential here, and the inspector agreed with us. Yes, it was a different applicant, yeah. Okay, so I think, yes, we're back to the start. So that's the story there. Really on this application, the applicant is asking very kindly if the planting belt, which was agreed at the last committee, could be altered with all that other compensatory planting which I've shown you, so they can then proceed to the next part of the story, which is the next application.
Thank you very much. So, questioners, I've just got a question. So, you've been very clear that some of it's not even planted yet, some of it's being thinned, and then there's new areas going in, and the amount of new area that's going to be planted up is in excess of what was previously offered. What sort of percentages in excess are we talking?
I haven't got those figures, okay. But if you do a visual comparison, you'll see that, if I go back a few slides, can I? You'll see that there is quite a difference. In terms of what's been planted and what hasn't, I must admit I don't have that information. Perhaps the applicant can tell us later on, but certainly it's been worked on. Okay, so that is the first one. So if you look at, well, it's difficult, yeah, okay, it's apples and eggs, it's difficult to compare exactly.
Okay, but we can see.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Yes, let's start down this end. First, Councillor Field.
Well, it's an obvious one. Could you refresh my memory? Why did we want a 10-metre bond there? Was it along a footway or something? What was the purpose of putting it exactly in that location?
Yeah, probably.
So I was at the meeting, but I've completely forgotten that detail.
I'm sorry to tell you. My colleague Vincent Pearce covered the committee. I wasn't there, but I think the fundamentals of it were that there was a wish to just try and disguise the development as much as possible. What's happened since then, as I didn't mention in my report, is that the site has been allocated as an employment land. So the applicant has a desire to expand use on the site, and that buffer would hamper progress.
So it was to hide something, it wasn't on a specific alignment for a defined purpose?
No.
This is purely speculative and not don't want this to be guaranteed, but Councillor Barker was on the committee at the time, and I think he was quite insistent being involved in this sort of thing, that he felt it would be appropriate, and talked about it to the committee. But I don't know if that, we can't be 100% sure that's from
I can
memory.
find the minutes if you want of the last meeting. Chair.
Okay. Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. So for whatever reason, 10 metres was deemed appropriate, probably to shield the visual impact of some buildings, but not necessarily. It was, I guess it could also have been in order to provide habitat. Whichever it might be, that was 10 metres. Why is 2 metres now being suggested as adequate? Is there have you got some reasoning why you think that would be appropriate? Having reduced it by, well, to 20%, but having some different planting in different places.
It's, I mean, saying it's been 10 has been replaced by 2 is an interpretation of it. What's actually happened is that 10 has been replaced by 6 for half the site, and then there isn't any at the north. But in addition to that is the 2 metres, or even more if you want, hedgerow on the western part of the site. So, yeah, having not had the advantage of being here, certainly it wasn't part of the application that there would be a green corridor, wildlife corridor through the site. That emerged during committee, so I don't know why that happened at the end of committee. But that wasn't certainly in the mind of the applicant at the time.
I've got the minutes to the last meeting, and it purely says, Councillor Leslie Mays proposed the application be approved as detailed for the offer's recommendation with additional conditions. 10 metres of landscape buffer on the Woolpit side and 5 metre boundary on the north frontage. So I suspect it was a decision discussed by committee, just decided to widen it on that section. Councillor Field.
Sorry, looking at slide 7, there's a dotted line which says public right of way. Yeah. So I guess the 10 metres was to ensure the public right of way was along a pleasant route, would be my view. And I certainly...
Ultimately, the decision made was the decision made, and I'm trying to, if I can push members away from that a little bit, ultimately, your consideration in respect of this application is whether the reconfigured landscaping arrangement is satisfactory and does not cause harm or concern in terms of probably the wider landscape issues. There is a public footpath along that site. It leads, I believe, to the A14 to cross over it, so I'm not convinced it would be the best thing to encourage. But ultimately, it's not something that the applicant can remove because they don't have the powers to do that. It's one of those things. So they have essentially lined up some of their landscaping against that public footpath. But whether that's just a default because it's logical, I don't know. I would say the other problem we have here is that photographs we've got, we can't take photographs from the A14 without endangering our lives or trying to hold a camera while driving at the same time. So a lot of those photographs are from the Google van, the cameras they use. If we actually go along there today, a lot of this building is actually up. I think you may notice it given the colouring of the building, and I think, you know, in that sense, we now have a better idea of how this impact of these buildings will be in context with the surrounding areas that we are now having to look at against the landscaping that we've got proposed before us. And ultimately, we've weighed that in the balance, and we're here before you today.
Thank you. Right, we're still on questions at this point. Any other questions on what's been presented? No? Okay, so we're going to move on to the speakers. So the Parish Council doesn't want to speak on this item. No objection, no support, but we do have the agent. If you'd like to come forward for 3 minutes, please. Bethan Hay, and over to you.
Good afternoon, Chair, members. My name is Bethan Haig and I'm the planning consultant for this application. I am representing the applicant, Woolpit Business Parks Limited. They are a family-run business, all of whom live in the local area, mostly in Woolpit itself. The application before you relates to the hybrid consent for the site granted in August 2018 for the provision of warehouses, offices and associated infrastructure. Occupiers have been confirmed for these units and one parcel has already been constructed and the second to follow imminently. A reserve matters application has been submitted on behalf of Bacton Transport. This Section 73 application is for a slight amendment to the already approved landscaping scheme associated with Condition 7 of that hybrid consent. It relates to minor changes to the condition wording and the landscaping scheme to the western part of the site, along with additional planting to the southwest. This amendment would enable greater flexibility in terms of allowing for further economic expansion of the business park, which relates to the separate application also before members today. I shall speak again in more detail on that application, and it is recognised that it will be considered on its own merits, but in summary, it seeks to expand the use of the business park in accordance with the NPPF and also your emerging joint local plan. This expansion of the existing business park has been driven by demand from prospective occupiers and also forms part of an emerging employment allocation. The business park's expansion is also supported by the Council's economic development officers, who have confirmed the demand for extra employment land in this location. Notwithstanding this, we consider the amendments to the landscaping will result in an enhancement to the overall development permitted as part of the hybrid consent, with the provision of scattered trees along the boundaries, creating filtered views from the surrounding area. The hedgerow and tree planting along the site's northern boundary will also assist in continuing to screen the site from long-distance views from Elmswell. It is also proposed that the new planting on the site's western boundary along the edge of the A14 will include native planting in keeping with the area. The application has not received any objections from statutory consultees, with Place Services Landscape confirming that they are satisfied with the changes proposed. Overall, the proposed amendments continue to meet and enhance where possible the principles agreed in terms of landscaping and the provision of a landscape buffer as part of the existing hybrid consent for the site. It is therefore respectfully requested that you support the officer's recommendation and approve this application. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Spot on 3 minutes. Okay, any questions at all for the... Yep, 1 sec. Any from the committee at this point? No? Okay. Councillor Mansell, you want to go?
Sorry, I hadn't picked this up before. I just want to clarify because the officer talked about the changes on the western side of this site. And I'm just re-looking at the diagram, and I just want perhaps the agent can clarify that the planting on the northern and eastern... What
page are you on?
I'm on slide 7 in my pack. The planting on the northern and eastern boundaries of the site, i.e. along the old A45 and Warren Lane, Woolpit, is going to be thickened, so it's going to provide a better buffer.
I can confirm that the changes proposed are just to the western edge, and there'll be, everything to the east has already been confirmed as acceptable and has been subject to a discharge of condition application. I can also confirm, I know there's some earlier discussion about whether there's going to be any loss of planting. I can confirm there'll be no loss of what's already on site now, and there has been some planting on site around the building that's currently been constructed. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much. So, ward members, over to you. If you want to add anything. Yeah.
I will say that despite this site being one of the economic development sites proposed in our joint local plan as being a site for development for employment use, both the communities of Woolpit and Elmswell don't really support increasing the number of increasing the size of the employment area here because of the traffic. And although this is only for changing of planting, this change to the planting schedule is to enable the other plots that we're going to come to later on today to be used. So the communities don't feel that the traffic from the employment site causes a lot of issue. This application is changing the planting to enable the site to grow. It is adjacent to the A14, but that junction is a one-way only junction, and it's fine if you are travelling westbound to get into the site. You just slip off at that junction. Any other traffic, when it comes out, goes through the communities of Elmswell and Woolpit. I will say more when we come to the other one, but it's purely to enable it to grow.
Yeah, I mean, we can only look at this application now, but we're only being asked to talk about the green growth on this application. I know the next one will address that point. So, do you have any questions for the ward members? Yep. No? No. Helen, do you want to add anything?
I probably should just say that I agree with the comments of Councillor Mansell and by Elmswell and Woolpit Parish Councils. They've been consistent, everybody's been consistent all the way through. There are ways to get to and from that site that don't go through the villages, but there's no way to enforce them. So I'll just say I agree with what's been said.
Thank you. Okay, members, so we've heard from all those that wish to speak today, and we've heard from the ward members. Over to you to discuss, debate and come to a conclusion. Councillor Mellon is first, then Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I wasn't sitting on the committee when the previous application was determined, but it seems to me that 10-metre buffer was put in to screen the site from the A14 as you're passing. And as you drive there now, of course, you've got this new building there, which is very clearly seen, and one hopes that the existing planting will help to screen that in time. But it seems to me that if we're shrinking what we've already agreed from 10 metres down to something less, then why not have a 10-metre buffer along the A14 itself rather than just a 2-metre hedge? I mean, that would seem to be the sensible thing to do, to provide the same amount of shielding from the road.
I don't know if there's any...
I really don't see a problem with this, and I think they already are doing enough compensatory planting to make up for what they're taking away, and so I'm happy to go along with the officer's recommendation for approval.
Just to say that I'd support Councillor Mellon in that on page slide 6 it talks about screening and screening units from view. I think fine, I've got no problems with the hedgerow being moved, but if it was 10 metres before, then it should be 10 metres along the A14, and then if the future development comes forward, we achieve the same objective.
I'm conscious of redesigning something without knowing all the understanding of the levels of this site. This site is not just a flat site. It does have different levels. So what planting may be effective in one area may not be as effective, even if it's wider, in another, in terms of what we're trying to achieve. I would perhaps also urge consideration of the view that we're talking about. It's the view from the A14. The view doesn't really go much further than that, on the basis that towards Woolpit you have significant landscaping on that side and different levels that are elevated. So it's not a wider view that's in effect a public view beyond going past at 70 miles an hour. For the most part, there are some footpaths, but they don't really look across the A14 in that context to then look at this site. Any planting is not going to get rid of the view of the building that is definitely there now, because of where that position of that building is. It may soften the view, and I think the question here is, will these changes remove that softening, or will they maintain the softening of those buildings? And in fact, is there a gain here in terms of your clustering landscaping, and possibly even from our point of view, this is the officer point of view, there was an ecology gain from clustering of landscaping in terms of habitat, but it's unfortunately swings and roundabouts in terms of what you're gaining and what you're losing here.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm happy to second Councillor Haddingham's proposal in support of the officer's recommendation. I too think the applicant has made an effort to actually ensure that we do have some green areas on this site, in addition obviously to removing some of the earlier, what we agreed a couple of years ago. But yes, I will support it on that grounds that they're not just going to ignore it, they are putting some more in.
Thank you, Chair. If we're looking at this on its own, which we have to do, clearly, well, in my view, clearly there is less of a screening of the buildings, and also these buildings are going to be used by vehicles, and they're going to be used by vehicles outside of the hours of daylight. So there is going to be a lot of lighting there. And I feel that if we had the 10 metres along the A14 instead of the reduction, that the filtering of the light as well as the filtering of the views of the buildings is well worthwhile. So I'm not happy with it. I do not understand why they have put forward a lesser bandwidth of planting along that edge.
So I'm happy to speak. Oh, do you want to just... Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, I did speak with the applicants before, just about if the debate went the way of the 2 metre hedge on the road, and they did say that they could probably stretch to 5 metres on the A14 side. So 5 plus 6 equals 11. You know, effectively it's a thicker screening than was proposed earlier. So if members are concerned about the 2 metres being insufficient, it can be 5 metres. It makes things a bit tighter, but it's deliverable.
So, Chair, how do we go about
we can do as we did last time. I mean, it's been proposed now by Councillor Haddingham, seconded by Councillor Muller. If that's other people want to raise that, we can talk about it, and then we ask the proposer and second if they're happy that that's a condition. I would like to speak, and I know Councillor Field would like to speak. Do you want to go first, John, then I'll come in after you?
Yes, I was just going to add, I'm inclined to think that 2 metres or even 5 metres to screen the A14 from a load of factories is a bit of imagination, but absolutely it would. We all know that wildlife lives in some strange places, certainly along the edge of roads where it gets less disturbed by humans and their dogs. So, you know, I can see the benefit of having a screen along the A14, a wildlife corridor, if you like, along the A14, and that if that were 5 metres rather than 2, there would be some benefit. I was slightly concerned about, well, narrowing the band as it was originally proposed, which I'm convinced was related to the public right-of-way and perhaps, again, some imagination about the extent to which people would walk that route. I think reducing it from 10 to 6 in some areas is acceptable, balanced, as you say, by some increases. Slightly concerned by the total removal sort of alongside Site 1, but I tend to see that as there's an economic driver for that, which probably outweighs my concern about removing the screen. Really, I'm not convinced that amount of trees screens buildings of the size we're talking about, particularly in any case. So I think broadly I'm in support of this, given the increase of the band along the edge of the A14 to 5 metres.
No one else? I'll just give my penny's worth. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because on one hand, we've got a site which has had application and came in before, and we've given planning permission. But on the other hand, they are asking to move some hedging that isn't even in. So we're not taking anything out, ripping out, you know, pre-existing ancient. We're just being asked to move the existing. And overall, there's a net gain to the environment of what's being proposed. Okay, it's 2 versus 10 in some places, but the overall site is seeing a net gain environmentally. So to me, that is a positive. So for me, it would be a double win. If we can have that plus the 5 metres, I'll feel that definitely that's worth supporting. So Councillor Haddingham and Councillor Miller, as the people that proposed and seconded approval, are you happy that it is conditioned with a following line that John will now read out?
Okay, so obviously this is a variation of condition application, and that would address all the proposal that's on the plan and plans and the documents before you. The addition, with variation of conditions, we can, because it's treated as a new application, add conditions. And so I would, rather than confuse the current condition 7 by trying to muck around with that, I would propose to add a further condition to say that notwithstanding details submitted, there shall be a scheme of landscaping along the A14 shown as 4 metres wide on the plans to be at least 5 metres wide, and the details should be agreed and shall be implemented as may be agreed.
So Councillor Haddingham and Councillor Miller, are you happy with that? Okay. Does anyone else wish to speak? I think we go to the vote on that basis. So, as per the recommendation as laid out on page 193 of our papers, along with the additional bullet point around the thickening of the hedge, all those in favour of the recommendation? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, so we move on to the next item, the final item for us today, which is on page 239 of the papers. Application DC 19-03851, outline planning permission and some matters reserved for development comprising a mixture of B1, B2, B8 uses at Lawn Farm, Woolpit. Over to you to present.
Thank you, Chair. Some of these slides will appear quite familiar to you because you've just seen them about 20 minutes ago. There are matters in common. Right, there we go. So, as explained earlier, that the evolution of the site is that the middle piece has already got the permission. We've just been discussing it. And the matter at hand now is for parcels to the east and the west. The application is in outline form, with all matters reserved apart from access, which is to the north, and landscaping. Now, we'll talk about landscaping in a bit, because the scheme as submitted may have to slightly change, and I'll explain why. So you've seen this already. This was the previously approved, and this is the one you've just approved with the amendment that the hedge, which now we're here, I might as well show it to you, it's that bit there you've just agreed should be 5 metres. So this is the new landscaping scheme for the whole site. No, wrong way again. Okay, I want to give you some views across from various places, just so you get some idea about what the landscape is at the moment, and it includes actually the building that's already been built there on the left. So we're going from the north there, across the site. This one also from the north. You've got the new road in. From the east, looking across the site there. From the south. From the southwest. And that's it, actually. I thought I had more than that. But the drawings, which will be, which you would give permission for, would be those relating to the access, and that's covered on. Yeah, it's got there. It is. Yeah, it's basically the top left there. It's not very detailed, but the access is to come in from the old Ipswich Road, Old London Road at the top, next to the Stag Cafe, and that is to be secured now. The landscaping, as shown here, has largely been agreed and is part of this application as well. But the reason there's a slight hesitancy because The landscaping people just want one or two more conditions, which sort of tweak what's been allowed. If I just take to their comments. Where is it? I can't see it. Where is it? Comments have fallen away, unfortunately. Okay. But they basically want some advanced planting and want bits and pieces, basically, just to slightly change what's there. So I'll put that in the recommendation. Another thing to say is that the floods team had an objection, which they've now withdrawn, but the commentary of that still stays in the report. So that's just a correction to make. Oh, here we are. Okay.
So can you just absolutely run through what we're being asked?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. My lack of clarity there is I was looking at the wrong application. They all look the same. There's three that look the same. I was looking at the wrong one. Basically, this is an outline application for the three parcels which we looked at on the previous.
Can we show us what we're being asked to
Yeah.
decide now?
Yeah. You remember the red drawing that I showed you on the other. In fact, could we look at the first presentation? I think it's probably got more stuff on it. It's an outline application with all matters reserved apart from access and landscaping. And it's for 3 units. Yes, please, yeah. Yeah, it's the one with the red blobs. There we go. Thank you very much. So the ones where you can see numbers 1, 2, and 3. This, by the way, is just indicative, illustrative. That isn't what the buildings will look like. We don't know what because obviously it depends on who comes along. So that'll be reserved matters applications. This outline, but basically 3 parcels of land. 1, 2, 3. The applicant is looking to put business units on all of those. This is secured now. This is the access. The landscaping is more or less sort of 95% what you see there. The reason there's a slight change is the landscape public place services have asked for conditions about advanced planting, landscape management and landscaping scheme. I think we've probably covered most of that already, but they've asked for that, so we'll have to have a resubmission of a discharge just to tidy that up. But, we're pretty much there. So what you see there is what you get at this stage, which is the access of the landscaping. The red blocks will follow at reserved matters.
Okay, so just to be 100% clear, what we're being asked to approve today is that 1, 2 and 3 get outline planning permission for development as either a B1, B2 or B8 use.
Yes, and the correction was that page 247, I'd commented on awaiting a comment from floods. That's actually now been received and there's no objection. Okay, so that's correct in the consultation field, but not correct though.
Okay. Councillor Mellon, you had a question.
I don't think your number 1 is in the right place. I think it's...
Oh, God, it isn't, is it? Sorry.
Right. Should be to the left of
Sorry
number
about
2.
that, yes. That where you're trying to be creative in paint box, that happens. Sorry, it's to be very clear, sorry, number 1's there. Thank you for that.
I've just raised a point that I just want clarified if John just wants 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Sorry. Yeah, the request was basically made just to make this presentation a bit clearer to you, because I showed you lots of slides which are interesting and pretty and relevant to the first one, but not really the second one. So I'm going to show you the few slides which are actually relevant to this one, and they basically relate to really only one or two drawings, which are the ones that show the parcels of land. That's pretty much it. When it appears, I'll show it to you. Okay, so have you got the one that shows, yeah. Yeah. Right. So, it's pretty much this, basically. That's it. It's those parcels of land. One to the east, one to the west, and the access. So not the landscaping, none of that, just the access. So it's a very simple outline application. That's all we've got. It just shows the parcels of land. And the Highway Authority hasn't objected. So the applicant is asking, could they have employment allocations on those parcels of land? That's all you need to concern yourselves with. I don't think I've got the actual planning drawing on there, but it's here. It's in your bundle.
Just to clarify, ultimately the drawing in front of you, that says constraint plan, but it's actually the same as the site location plan on page 300. So for this, this is a proposal, this is an outline application where the landscaping is it's an unusual one because effectively it's in amongst an application that's already been approved for industrial use. So landscaping is piggybacking on the landscaping that's already been part of the previous approval. Access is again piggybacking on the fact that the access to the main road has already been agreed, and this is not proposing to change that. These are just the additional land parcels that would connect up to the internal internal road network that's already been approved. So as much as this is an outline that says access and landscaping, those two elements are by default there. So they don't have to actually give much detail about that. Ultimately, we just have outline for principle only for the space to come back as reserved matters for a building, number of buildings, different shape sizes, whatever they might be. But at this moment in time, it's just for this land to comprise for potential B1, B2 and B8 uses, and whichever quantities of that they might come forward as. It unfortunately is as simple as that, and it feels like we should be saying a lot more, and I think that's perhaps where we struggled a bit this morning, or this afternoon now, but ultimately it is an expansion of an existing industrial use in compliance with the local plan policy on expansion of industrial uses. There is future potential allocation of this site in respect to the joint local plan. That has little weight at this time, as we've been discussing in other applications. But it is the direction of travel. How that may indicate your debate, I don't know. That's for you. And I think, unfortunately, this is as much as we can say, because this is as much information as we have as an application for you to make that consideration in terms of the principle of development.
Thank you. So we've got questions at this point before we move on to speakers. Yeah, Councillor Field and Councillor Whelan.
Firstly, the Parish Council refers to our local plan, our emerging local plan, and points out that it states that we have a sufficiency of employment land. I was going to question, is that true, and how should I view that? I guess I'll ask the second one at the moment as well. The second one is the access to this site, if we think of it in its wider terms, is from the A14. And clearly that's short and without particular difficulty. The exit is somewhat different. Could you just explain where emerging traffic goes to re-access the major road network? Because this is clearly quite an intensification of the use of this site.
Yeah, Highways England didn't object, nor did the Highway Authority as responsible authorities for those matters. So there's not a perceived issue there with that. In terms of the employment, obviously we've got response from the relevant officer in support of the scheme, and I've evidenced in my reports that there's a take-up and an interest in this site, so it's likely that the units will be filled out.
And just to support that, in respect of the employment allocation of the joint local plan, you are, and the current position, you are right. We do have sufficient employment land allocated and available, but the economic development team have difficulties with certain allocations in terms of take-up. So there is a balance between what is the right land in the right locations in terms of availability and market-led versus other allocations that aren't taking up. Now, when we dealt with this application previous, we did go into detail on that, and the example I can give you is there's a lot of allocations around Stowmarket near Cedars Park, and of course that's been sitting there dormant and not been taken up from the 1998 local plan. So that still sits in the numbers of availability of land, but it's not being taken up. So we have to have a balance between, realistic figures of what needs to be put forward to be taken up, as well as what our local plan has sought in the past. I don't know the answers entirely to that. That's why we go to the economic development team, and they have supported this one on that basis. It's the right land for the particular clients that we have interested in coming to Suffolk for this purpose. We also have the issue that this is an expansion in effect of the Woolpit Business Park, which is running out of land availability to them, and they wish to continue growth, and this is the nearest location they feel appropriate to them, which is literally just on the other side, for them to expand. And I think these are issues to perhaps debate as well and take into account when considering this proposal. There was another point there. In terms of the highways issue, the answer is yes, there is a direct access off the A14 one way in order to get onto quite direct access to this site. But to get back out to the A14, you are correct, you'd have to go back down to the Hawley interchange, is that the right name? Tot Hill, thank you. Interchange. Now, it does require a different path for a reasonable distance, and it does include going through some residential areas in order to get to that interchange. So there is, and there has been a historic issues around that have been debated previously, but it's not something that we feel we're at a point of severe highway impact that we would warrant refusal in this case.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of queries, and it's to do with the access. Are there currently 3 accesses into this site? And depending on the answer to that...
Can you explain 3?
Well, they appear to be, it's coloured that there's an access out into Warren Lane. Is that correct? There's a crossroads in the middle of the site.
Yeah, there's an access onto Warren Lane. Yeah.
There's an access onto Warren Lane. Are there 2 accesses onto Old Bury Road?
Some are vehicular, some aren't.
Yeah, I mean it's not clear on the drawing. And then so that takes me to slide 7, which has and in terms of the accesses, it would appear to me that the difference between the 2 is in the key there is an arrowhead which says access point, and it shows the arrowhead pointing into the sort of spine road. Can you is that just an entry?
Sorry, Councillor, is that the presentation on the first item we looked at?
No, it's slide 7.
The slide numbers are different.
Very last page of the bundle.
My apologies. I'm missing those two last pages, so I do apologise. Ultimately, the access, and what the case officer will confirm, there are two accesses which would be onto Bury Road, and one access is onto Warren Lane, and I assume that they've been the previous accesses approved as part of the first phase of use.
The access off of the Bury Road, which is from the north there, is that's part of the original hybrid. The one over to the east is existing, and the new one is to the north.
Chair, what I was trying to seek clarification on, the relevance of the access point with the arrowhead. Is that going to be the only way? Is that going to be the only way into the site in future? If we're here to approve an access arrangement and it's not clear on the drawing, I don't quite know what I'm being asked to approve.
Yeah, sorry. That's a fair point. I should be able to give you all these answers. Actually, I think I just said the wrong way around. I think that the one to the arrow is the new access. The applicant will tell you more in a minute, but that's my understanding. Do you want to defer? Is that what you're saying, John?
I'm going to apologise to members, but I feel that we need to go away and look at the presentation of the information to you in order for you to make a robust and informed decision, and I don't think we've done that at this time, so I apologise, and I would humbly request a deferral on that basis.
Just apologise to the applicant, but I'm. Yes, the problem is we're not getting a clear definition in our papers, we're not getting a clear number of slides, and we as a committee have to be confident in the information that's provided for us. I totally get your frustration. I appreciate you thought this would be decided in November, but as a committee we have to make sound decisions based on what's presented, and we haven't got that today. So I will ask that it comes back in 2 weeks' time, if you can, to try and get Development Control Meeting B to Guthrie's committee. Can we, because it is only a matter of getting the right information together, and take it in 2 weeks so there's not hanging around.
My apologies.
They will do that. It'll go in 2 weeks' time.
My apologies, Chair. I should have checked that.
No, it's too late. The papers are out. I do apologise. That's not a very satisfactory meeting to defer 2 items, but we'll leave that with the Cabinet member to pick up. Thank you.